We have Matt Brahan. Would you like to come up and take a seat, please? And that way you will be on the microphone. And
this one okay?
yes.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Let me know when you're ready.
Start. There you go.
All right, as I continue my adventures into learning the operations of the school board and the district, I have spoken with many staff members, both former and current, to see if the concerns I had were relevant or just speculation. Through my conversations with them, I received concerns directly from those who are impacted by the current construction project and the management of funds within District 7. With the lack of transparency, false promises, and failures to communicate, I want to share these concerns with you. In the spirit of time, I'll focus my concerns on the Lincoln project and paraphrase the concerns that were communicated to me in hopes they can be addressed. These opinions don't speak for everyone, only the staff members who relayed their concerns in fear of retaliation of reporting otherwise. In 2023, the superintendent discussed plans for Lincoln construction with the staff, which are vastly different than the plans they are seeing today. And the staff was asked for volunteers to create a facilities team for the input on the project. A few teachers were chosen, but had reportedly only met once. In August of 24, Lincoln teachers were asked to tour the new part of the building. This was the first time most teachers knew about the layout and the plans for the new part of the building. Many were not happy with what they saw. There were only 3 spaces for additional classrooms, 2 would be health and the other for elective offerings such as biology, which is the first that the staff reportedly had heard this. The PE offices do not have the ability to see into the locker room to monitor students, which is a safety concern and potentially logistic problems for those teachers. So far this year, 14 teachers have been displaced, and those teachers were only given 6 hours of curriculum pay to pack up their rooms and create an inviting space in their new classrooms. Some of these new rooms struggle with regulating temperatures, no windows, small rooms, shared rooms, and no storage. Teachers have no idea how long they will be in these rooms and how long they will be in the following year. It is reported that 6 or more classrooms will be placed in the gym balcony. This is terrifying for so many reasons and not the best for students. Even if temporary walls are placed, it is hard to regulate the temperature and there are many safety concerns. With that being said, since the staff at Lincoln has to deal with the inconveniences of construction, why is it that the leadership is not back at Hadley? Wouldn't it be a better use of funds to place teachers and students in trailers for a better education and learning environment? I know teachers in Lincoln administration are creating the best environment for students that they can with what they are given, but they have expressed concerns that the projects were rushed at the end of the summer and the floor is popping up, space is not what was promised, temperature regulation continues to be a problem, and the conditions are not ideal for everyone. Some of the questions for the board, so you know, is why did District 7 not focus on classroom space first? Will there be money left to construct space that is adequate or better than they have now? Why are they losing classroom space instead of gaining it? Will they have more classrooms than what they have now? Will they be able to continue to grow? Will the district administration ever ask for a whole group feedback from Lincoln teachers? Or will they?
Mr. Brahan, we're out of time. If you would like to pass that along, you are welcome to email your comments to the board.
Awesome. Thank you so
Okay?
much.
Thank you. Would anyone else have any comments for the board? Seeing none, we would like as a board to thank you for coming and speaking tonight, and we are unable to address your comments at this time, but we will have conversations with administration about the topics that were brought up, and you should expect to hear a conversation or have some communication from Dr. Shelton. And we will move to our first discussion item, which will be the PLCs, Professional Learning Communities, and I would like to welcome Tara Fox, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, who will join our meeting to discuss the PLCs and Guiding Coalition. And team, it looks like.
Never come
Jeff, what's left?
Good evening. Everybody hear me?
I said you can pull that microphone around.
All right. So we are here tonight just to talk a little bit about professional learning communities in District 7 and sort of our trajectory that we have taken over the last 3 years to get to the point where we are right now, explain a little bit about what professional learning communities are and why they're important and kind of what they look like in our schools. So I'm going to start with our learning targets for tonight, and it's important that we have presented it in this way because this will connect directly to our PLCs and the shift that we are taking with instruction in the classroom as a result of the professional learning community work. And so by the end of this presentation, we hope that you will have a better understanding of why PLC and what is it. What does it look like in the trenches, in the classrooms? So we'll have perspective from a collaborative team and then supporting collaborative teams, and then also professional development and implementation from 2022 when we first started on this journey to today. So that's what we hope to go over in this brief time tonight. I have a phenomenal team with me, like I always do when I come and present. So I want to introduce them to you first, and then we will kind of divide everything up this evening. So I'll talk a little bit later at the end about exactly kind of what we did as a district in preparing for the implementation of PLCs. But one thing that we started with is a small team that we called our District Guiding Coalition. And that team back in 2022 went to our first PLC at Work conference, learned about the process and how we could bring it back to our district and effectively implement. So the people with me tonight were all part of that original team, and they represent the various different levels of our district, working together. So I have Lauren Mulligan, who is currently sorry, I took your microphone. A elementary instructional coach, a former elementary teacher in our district. And then to my immediate left is Nikki Pontius, EHS English teacher, and then Michael Corey, who represents the building administration, the principal of Lincoln Middle School when we originally started our guiding coalition, the assistant principal at Liberty Middle School. So I'm going to turn it over at this time to Lauren to give you a little more background of what a PLC is.
Good evening. So let's talk about why we do PLC in the first place. You'll see in our presentation that it ties very closely to our mission, our vision, and our values as a district. So again, our mission is empowering each student to achieve personal success. And in a professional learning community, teacher practice and student outcomes are continuously analyzed, and they're done collaboratively. So each student's success is considered everybody's shared commitment that way. Similarly, our vision to build a thriving community of learners while creating authentic, meaningful pathways to success for each student. Our thriving community of learners includes students, but it also includes staff. Professional development, sharing strategies, all the collaboration really grows the adults of our district as well. And lastly, we value community, inclusivity, integrity, students, and success. And we know that students are at the center of every decision that we make in our meetings, and as a whole community, we provide supports that are necessary for students as well as employees so that everybody can achieve meaningful outcomes. So what is a PLC? I'm going to give you a very broad general explanation here, and then we'll get really deep down what it looks like in a minute. But a PLC is an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in reoccurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for students that they serve. So that sounds great, but what does that actually mean? We have some research that guides our practice here. John Hattie is a major education researcher. He has nearly 30 years of experience, and his research is referred to as visible learning, if you want to do more research yourself. It's a collection of meta-analyses where the outcome is academic achievement and learning. So you can kind of see up here that every factor of education practically is studied, and then all of those things are ranked in the outcome. We see that the average influence of the things we do have a scale. An effect size over 0.4 is above average and therefore has the greatest potential to improve learning outcomes for students. You can see the mean effect size of collective teacher efficacy is 1.57 here. And it is consistently a top influence in student improvement. And it is an ever-evolving as people continue to research and we collect more data on student learning, it just ranks consistently high. So a big part of that in our district is making sure we have that. And what that looks like is the following here: consistent priorities for teacher teams and individual teachers on the same page. We think about common pacing. We carry the load together. So we distribute certain strategies and things throughout. We work together that way to build new ideas. It promotes clarity, and we have a collaborative culture this way. Everybody always making shared decisions. So PLC is based on 3 very big ideas, which we'll go into with our following team members. But the first one is a focus on learning, not necessarily the teaching aspect. Number 2 is our collaborative culture. And then number 3 is our focus on results. So we are a data-driven district and strive continuously to remain that way. And 4 critical questions also guide throughout cycles. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? So that is, for every student that comes through our district, what do we expect of them? And how can we get to that consistent goal or that standard for all kids? The second guiding question, how will we know if they haven't learned it? And again, that's everybody. We define the criteria in which all student learning is measured. Number 3, how will we respond when some students do not learn? So we're thinking about the differentiation piece there. How do we scaffold instruction? Where do we need additional support? What does intervention look like? And then we work on how that is provided. And then lastly, number 4, how will we extend the learning for students who are already proficient? We have a lot of students that also fit that category. So thinking about the grade level standards, but then considering enrichment, extension activities, tying in some of those really motivating pieces in education. So I'm going to turn it over now to Nikki about our team perspective.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nikki Pontius, and I'm an English teacher at Edwardsville High School. So I'm going to actually just kind of give you my perspective as a teacher who is, in the trenches, going through this process with my colleagues. So going over the 3 big ideas, first and foremost, the focus on learning. To me, this was a game changer. When I went to the first PLC conference, looking at my role as an educator, as a coach, rather than how education has traditionally been seen as, teachers, we lecture, right? We offer students information. It's up to them if they grasp it, and then we assess them and we stamp a grade on it and we move on. And that's not effective, right? We know that not all kids are learning when we do that. So the focus on learning, to me, one big analogy that really drove home for me was looking at my role as an educator, as a coach. And so, with any sports team, right? If I'm the coach, we're going to practice, right? All of the skills that students need to know how to do in order to achieve success. Once we have practiced, then I may host a scrimmage, right? So I'm going to provide them an assessment that's going to mimic what a game might look like, so they know exactly what to expect. They have practiced the skills. There's no surprise here, right? Other than I'm just prepping them for the game. That's the ultimate goal. The game is the assessment. At the end of all of this, as a teacher, the assessment is what I will then evaluate to be able to assess and determine if my students truly understand whatever that goal might be. And then I don't just move on, right? As any good coach would do, if I realize that my team isn't performing in the way that they should, I'm gonna recoach, I'm gonna reteach, I'm gonna continue to practice. I'm going to do another scrimmage, right? I'm going to do another assessment. That way I can evaluate where the student learning is occurring and where I need to provide more structure and more, more focused practice in order to get them where they need to be. So that's one of our big ideas, really, is just focusing on the learning that is occurring rather than, the lesson that I'm giving. We're getting away from it being teacher-oriented, teacher-focused, but now we're focusing on our students and what they're able to do and how we're able to evaluate if they're achieving those goals. The second big idea, the collaborative culture. As Lauren mentioned, again, teaching has traditionally been, oh, the kids are gone, let me shut my doors so I can grade, so I can plan, right? So I can do all these things. Instead of me working on my isolated island in my room with my door shut, drowning some days, now I have a team. And so as a team, we are meeting together. Not only does that help pull the weight of what we are doing and the work that we are doing, we all know more heads together, right? You come up with so many more ideas, so many more practices that you wouldn't have thought of on your own. So having the collaborative culture, not only will it help us align our essential standards that we are all in agreement as a team of teachers, these are the essential skills our students need to know how to do in order to move on and be successful. So, as a team of teachers, we're meeting horizontally, we're meeting across courses to make sure that our courses align, that all students are provided with the same experience, the same sort of practice, the same sort of scrimmage, the same game situation, right? We know that we want the coaching to happen evenly. We don't want one superstar coach, right, with a rock star team playing a team that's not getting the same amount of practice and the same sort of experience. So both horizontally, but then also vertically. So, as a 9th grade teacher, a 10th grade teacher, 11th, 12th, what are these students knowing how to do as they come to me? And those teachers are making sure they know what they need to know. And then at a vertical level, we can build upon those skills, right? To really, truly gain that depth of knowledge that we are wanting them to achieve where they are at, again, horizontally and vertically. And then, again, as I mentioned, using the most effective practice to ensure learning. We all have different ideas, we all have different approaches. I know within my department, there are certain teachers that do some really exciting new things with technology, and we have other teachers that can lead a really good fishbowl, and we have other teachers that have their strengths, and so we are pulling from the strengths which within our own professional community that we have created as a team to share those tactics, those strategies. In education, there are so many things we can always be doing, and it's fun to really dive into all the fun new pieces of technology and tactics and strategies, but until you can put them into practice and really share the success from another educator who's doing it well, that's golden, right? And so learning from each other is just, it seems silly not to. And then lastly, the third big idea is the focus on results, and again, being data driven. So having a common expectation amongst all courses, having a common assessment, how are we all commonly assessing that game situation in order to ensure that every student is learning, and then reflecting on that data to ensure that all are learning. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you just kind of an example of what that looks like in the practice that I've been doing within my personal team. I teach, at the high school, I teach English. I currently teach Explorations Reading and Writing, which is a 12th grade level course. I also teach debate. This year, the team that I consistently meet with is my 12th grade team. So, we meet together, and every week we determine where we're at in the cycle. And the cycle is ongoing. It never stops, right? So another analogy that we've used as we've really talked about, teaching other educators within the district to really jump into this process is, we're building the house brick by brick. So every time we go through the cycle, we've got another sturdy brick in our tool belt, right? Another, common assessment that we've discussed, we've determined, we've come up with strategies on how to teach that particular lesson to our students. And then we're gonna do it again with the next unit until eventually, right, we have this jam-packed tool belt that all teachers are consistently using that we have determined has been best practice using data to drive our results and also to reteach and to reintroduce new ideas and concepts. So we start with one, what do we want our students to learn? That has been a really, really important focus for us in these early years of establishing our professional learning communities, within each school, but really looking as educators at our course and what are the essential standards that each student, and we mean every single one, not just the ones who grasp the knowledge we're offering, but what do we think students must know how to do? Like they must know how to do this in 9th grade to move on to 10th grade and be successful. They must know how to write, and all of these are life skills that we're building for them to go out and be successful. So we look at our essential standards, we unpack those standards, we really truly provide clarity amongst our team, because as we engage in those professional discussions, we may realize that what I thought the standard might have meant, maybe looked differently to another educator. So it's allowing us to really truly engage and have this platform where we can truly talk about what that standard looks like and what our expectation is for the students, because clarity is so important for our students, right? You don't want to play in a game if you don't know the rules. So we have to allow the students to truly understand what is our expectation for them and what do we want them to achieve. That could take weeks, depending on where we are as a team. I know at the high school specifically, there are some departments, right, like the math, the sciences, they're very aligned, whereas you have some subjects that are a little bit more subjective. And so for us in our team, in my team specifically, it's a lot of discussion about how are we aligning, what our expectations are for our students, and how are we supporting those with our priority standards from the state of Illinois. And unpacking those. Once we have determined a clear goal for a unit, then we're going to say, okay, well, how will we know that students have learned it? So then we start to talk about what assessments to use. So when we practice, right, how are we getting some of that, using formative assessments in order to see where they're at in learning and understanding and that particular concept. And so we share ideas, we share ways to evaluate our students. We eventually determine a common assessment that we all agree upon. So that way our data, right, is comparable to each other in the team. And once we determine that common assessment, we come up with our plan. We have our autonomy to teach in the way that we do best. But that common assessment is the data that we need to really truly figure out, right? What you did was really great. Your students performed higher than mine. Can you tell me what you did? Share with me. And so then we can explore strategies in order to make sure that every student is achieving that goal. So that process, again, it's a lot of collaboration, right? A lot of sharing strategies and data. What do we do if they already know it? So what if we have the game and they knock it out of the park, right? Well, we want to challenge our students. We want to continue to push them. Just because they've achieved what we thought is an essential standard, how do we elevate that? So that's when we, as a team, will talk about other pathways and avenues and maybe project options, maybe extensions on an assignment in order to help elevate that learning. We don't want to stop, right, and just say, you're good. You can chill now. We want to continue to allow that growth to occur. And then lastly, what will we do if they don't learn it? And that is the point in when we look at our data and we say, all right, like something's going on here, right? Maybe 15, they've hit the mark, but 5 did not, and we're not leaving them behind, right? So now, as a team, how do we continue to elevate, but also go back and pull the others up? And so that's when we, use collaboration. We use a lot of the resources that we have currently at Edwardsville High School. We maybe collaborate with honors levels teachers, right, to get some resources to be able to provide those students who have already hit the mark but need to be challenged further. We may have other students do different forms of intervention. We have a writing center at Edwardsville High School for students to visit. They can come before school and during lunches. We have after-school tutoring. We've got several options that we can then work together and try to create that space. I know other methods too that are occurring in schools, having certain teachers pull, right, those students to elevate the learning that's occurring while other teachers, so even kind of teacher sharing and swapping kids and working together to really create some different settings and environments and options for these students in order to get them to the level that we need to get them to. And again, it's ongoing, it's continuous, and once we feel like we successfully made our round, which in fact my team has not, we are still in the trenches, and that's okay, because there are other teams that have completed cycles and are ongoing. And that's kind of what's beautiful about it is, as an educator, we are finally given a professional space and time to do what we have been trained and what we know how to do. And that is to teach our students, right? And we can use each other as a team, and we can collaborate, and we just continue. And there's always work to be done, and there's always things to revisit. So that is what, I know I feel like I talked for a really long time. Sorry, Michael, but that's what it is. And it's just, there's so much. I mean, you're never finished, right? You're always, okay, well, and maybe one year we do the cycle and it goes really well, and maybe next year it doesn't. And so we have to, education's ongoing and ever changing, and maybe at that point we have to reconsider what we're doing and do it better. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the collaboration that you're talking, is that the early release Wednesdays?
Yes.
Is that the only time, or do you find other times throughout the week, throughout the day? And it might be different schools more than just the high school. So.
Sure. I certainly think, every team has bonded differently. What I think is really refreshing about the time that we've been given on Wednesdays is that has opened the door to, every single teacher, coach, right, admin, everyone in the entire building is engaged in the PLC process during that time. So that is dedicated time that teachers, some reluctantly at first, right, because change is always scary, but that has really opened a pathway for not only to encourage and allow those professional conversations to occur, but we're seeing it as the guiding coalition, and we meet and discuss to get a pulse on our schools. We're seeing that it is seeping everywhere, right? So the conversation starts, but we're teachers, so we love learning. So we're always, geeked out about talking about where the successes are occurring. And so, yes, it's happening at lunch, it's happening after school, it's happening in other areas, but having that dedicated time is so important, because in our busy lives, we always feel like we have other things we could be doing, but this is time where it is completely dedicated to this. And so, and I know a lot of teams that get excited about coming together on Wednesdays, because it's, they have that time and space, and they don't feel like they're pulled in other directions because they can't be, right? So that's our dedicated time.
I'm glad to hear it's working out so well.
I know.
Yeah. Hi everyone, Michael Corey. I'm the principal at Lincoln Middle School. When I started this process, I was the assistant principal here at Liberty. And Ms. Burles, I think you asked a great question I was just going to piggyback off of a little bit is, one thing that I try to do both at Liberty and at Lincoln was try to move past this concept that PLC is a meeting for an hour on a Wednesday, right? I always like to tell my staff and our students that PLCs is really a mindset, right? It's not about like what we're doing on this day, but who we are as a school and as a district and what we believe in. And as Lauren and Nikki really illustrated, all of our work goes right back to our mission statement, which is empowering all of our 7,500 students to achieve personal success. And we really kind of keep that in the forefront of what we do on a daily basis. I'm going to kind of move into a different perspective. So Nikki did an excellent job of illustrating just how much work gets done within one team, right? On a weekly basis, on a daily basis. In my role as an administrator, it's important to support that, but not from a one-team perspective. I've got like 20 or so that I help oversee just at the middle school level alone, right? So that presents a different type of set of challenges, right? How can we be invested in all of these different teams, monitor their progress, and kind of give them what they need to get so that they can work and do all the things that Nikki kind of illustrated. So what I've done in our presentation, just kind of illustrated some of the things that our building leaders and administrators do with respect to the three big ideas. So we saw it from a perspective of a teacher and within their teams, and then this is some of the stuff that we're doing as leaders within those three big ideas in PLCs. So
Can I interrupt you?
Oh yeah.
You might want to put the mic in front of you. We can hear you, no problem, but that way if
I've never been told that before.
Well, that's
That's the first. Awesome.
Your voice carries very
Got
well.
it.
Just
Absolutely.
thank
So
you.
with the first big idea up there, the focus on learning, Nikki spoke a lot about how we're moving from the traditional teaching model to we're focusing on learners and how they learn and making sure that we reach every student. So what we try to do as a leadership team is provide supports for our PLTs on shifting instructional strategies and practice to focus on that learning, right? So not just telling them, hey, we need to not just give direct instruction, we need to do something else. We got to fill in the gaps on what that something else is. That's working with our instructional coaches, that's doing our research and figuring out what instructional strategies are out there and bringing that to these meetings so that teachers can collaborate on those ideas. One of the biggest things that we're noticing as we move through this process is making sure that we're creating frameworks to outline what our tasks and what our expectations are. I'll self-admit, when we started this process, we had a very small goal in mind and we kind of put it out there at the goal as a goal. We had no framework to it, no end game, and I don't know if you guys know teachers that well, but teachers are planners and they want to know exactly what to do, when to do it, and when to have it done. Okay, so it's really important for us to kind of think ahead of a month, 2 months, 6 months in advance and plan years out so that they can see the big picture, because what we're finding is as we structure the big picture more and they see the end game, the work just really increases because they know what they're working towards. What we're trying to do currently, and I'm speaking kind of from a middle school perspective, but we have been operating kind of on a year-by-year basis of addressing each of the big 4 questions. So 2 years ago, we really addressed what do we want students to know, which is our learning standards, okay? Last year, we kind of shifted to how will we know when they know it. So we've started developing these assessments, common summative assessments, common formative assessments. The next piece is intervention, right? What do we do when they don't learn it? And that's what we're currently trying to work in. We're looking to find ways to build intervention into the school day by kind of manipulating our master schedule and see if we can work in kind of a fluid time for students to step into a classroom, get additional reteaching or additional content support kind of within the school day, and then once they're brought up to proficient levels, getting them back into the classroom. So that's kind of our goal, and those are some of the long-term things that we're planning towards now. And then we develop annual SMART goals. For the last 2 years at the middle school level, we've had SMART goals that each of our team kind of worked to achieve this year. And the important part about that is that they're really specific and that they're measurable so that we know when we're achieving success and we know kind of the progress that we're on. From a collaborative culture standpoint, this is the biggest kind of attribute that we need to develop in our teams. If our teams aren't able to collaborate within themselves, then we know that the work doesn't quite come along as we would like it to. So we try to provide professional development from colleagues to create teacher efficacy. When we first went to a PLC conference 2 years ago, one of the big things that they talked about was this can't be a top-down approach. This cannot be this came from the district office and everyone's following suit, because there's no autonomy in that. So what we've really tried to do is empower our teachers. And thank you to the board and district administration for sending so many of our teachers to these solution tree conferences, because we now have building teams full of empowered teachers who know the work, who see the work, and are kind of taking the ship and running with it. At the middle school level alone, we were able to develop 3 subcommittees from our building teams this year that are specifically targeted to helping all of our teachers reach our SMART goals that we've developed. And I'll show a little bit of that in some pictures that I've gotten in a little bit. We attend PLT meetings every single week. All 6 middle school assistant principals, as well as our 4 instructional coaches, have created a schedule for the rest of this semester, and we'll do so for next semester to ensure that we're getting into all of the different PLT meetings, supporting those groups, and making sure not only are they making progress on their SMART goals, but that they feel supported and we answer any questions that they may have. We've created shared documents and shared storage for everyone so that the work that they're doing, everyone has access to, and it's in a central location. And then, like I alluded to a little bit ago, we've created committees within our building teams that work particularly to our SMART goals. And then some of our work that is coming in the future, because we quite haven't landed at our focus on results and being completely data-driven across the board, but that's next for us. So what we've done this year while we're creating these common assessments is outline the expectations for those assessments, and then we meet with the groups whenever they finalize these assessments and ensure that it meets kind of all the criteria that we would want a common assessment to meet, and to ensure that our students are being proficient learners. And like Nikki talked about, making sure that they get all of the knowledge that they need to be successful and to move on to the next grade level. We're going to work on creating a data collection tracking system for all of our teams so that that system looks seamless. So if you went in with a 6th grade math team versus you went in with a 8th grade world languages teacher, their method for collecting data and reviewing that data would look the same, so that our process for analyzing student data and knowing what targets and what learning expectations we need to address is very, very similar. And then we attend meetings to review student data with the PLTs. That's going to come next year. So our data collection within our core subject areas, and really all of our subject areas, is really going to start next year from a unit by unit basis. And we're going to push into those meetings and be a part of that data review and help kind of guide that process of making data-driven decisions on instruction and student learning. So just to kind of illustrate some of the work that we've been doing, I've got some pictures up here. The first 3 Wednesdays of the year, the middle school met as a whole. So we didn't meet in buildings, we didn't meet in separate teams, we met as a full middle school. And what we did the first week was we kind of gave an overview presentation on what the year was going to look like. We outlined our SMART goals for the year and communicated that to all of our staff, and then kind of talked about the next coming weeks. What you see up here is some pictures of our next 2 weeks, where our different committees that I illustrated took on presentations of their own and modeled and gave professional development to their colleagues. So rather than what we see time after time again, administrators getting up and presenting to teachers, we've got teachers presenting to teachers, which is this process. There's a whole lot of collective teacher efficacy in those pictures that you're looking at up here. Like I said, we divided into some subcommittees. One of those committees was focused on one SMART goal, and then one was focused on the other. So this year it was learning or essential standards and learning targets, and then the other committee was common assessments, and that's what they're presenting on up here. And there's some real success stories up here. Okay, I want to point out really quickly, if you look at the top right picture up there, that's an 8th grade language arts teacher. Her name's Tracy Thompson, and she's in my building at Lincoln. And anyone that knows Tracy, she is stepping outside of her comfort zone by presenting to not only all of her colleagues in her building, but then everyone else at Liberty as well. And I think that those are the rewards that we're reaping from this process, is we're seeing the bigger picture, right? And for Tracy that day, it was much more important to get up in front of her colleagues and present this information so that everyone had shared knowledge, rather than it was to sit and listen that day, which is awesome. And then the last one is in the bottom left. That's Kelly Bruce. She's an 8th grade social studies teacher here at Liberty. And what she has figured out a way to do is the assessment that she's giving on her digital platform, which is McGraw-Hill, she's found a way to run a report that generates students' outputs on every single question on her assessment, how they did, and then how they can review that data. So we're kind of looking into the future in that picture, because that's what we want all of our meetings to look like. We want teachers presenting collective data on their assessments and reviewing that data and then making necessary changes. So we're progressing really, really well. We're making great strides, and these pictures are kind of all the encouragement that I need in this process and how far we've come. So.
One of the questions I have, and this is really for everybody on the panel, are you talked about scrimmages and games, but really the championship is the PSAT or the IAR or ISA, whatever the assessment is. So have you seen success? I know y'all have been doing PLCs for a couple of years. You're still working on implementation, but are you already seeing evidence of success in those championship games based on what's happening with your PLC work?
We are seeing some gains moving up. We have a kind of a combination of lots of different factors that are playing into that, though, right? We have the PLC implementation, and it, like any other curriculum, like you're looking at, we're in year 3, and all of these wonderful successes that you're hearing now are year 3 successes. Like, I'm not going to pretend like there were not bumps in the road. There were all kinds of bumps and boulders in the road, and I'll go through kind of the process that we went through in just a second. So we are finding now, I'm seeing sort of a critical mass of staff who understand, have that clarity that we talked about previously, to be able to really do the work effectively and feel confident in doing
Yeah.
it
So
effectively.
you're getting a return on the investment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that coupled with a lot of changes in our instructional practices and curriculum reviews, so that's all kind of coming in together. We're starting to see some gains upward, but in the next few years, we'll really start to see, once we get into that, that year 5, where we've really been doing it long enough.
And the other question I had, Mr. Corey, is are you finding that you're building your own PLC amongst other administrators through this process? Just collaboration with them, both formally, informally?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the first tasks that they tell you when you go to this and you're starting from the ground is to create a guiding coalition, right? And we're 4 of the founding members of that guiding coalition, and we've done the same thing within our buildings. We kind of have a middle school guiding coalition, so it's all 6 administrators and our instructional coaches, but we meet as regularly as our core content teams just to talk about the supports that we're providing and making sure that the messages that we're giving to our different, our staff in our buildings is the same. We're really making a vested interest in being the same across the board so that we can really hone in on that equity piece.
Okay, so if you go to Liberty or Lincoln, it doesn't matter, you're gonna get the same.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Well, I appreciate that you're saying that we're in year 3, because basically you started this from scratch 3 years ago. And the board, the superintendent brought this idea to the board, and the board said, yes, okay, let's go ahead and create this Wednesday opportunity for PLCs. And so we said, go for it. It's yours now. And I think that really is important to note that it was only 3 years ago.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of go through where we were just from a professional development lens across the district. First, I feel like I need to say, at the risk of sounding arrogant, one of my biggest strengths is surrounding myself with brilliance. As you can see here tonight, the 3 that I have with me and all the people in our guiding coalition have really just been amazing stewards of what we need to do as a district to ensure that our shift is from teaching to learning. And if you're not in it, I don't know that doesn't seem like a big shift, like it's the same thing, right? But it's a huge shift. It's not about what I did as a teacher, it's about what they learned, what they gleaned from it, the skills that they're able to do. And then that takes away the concern of sharing data, because it's not about you anymore, it's about the kids. And if she's doing it better, then what are you doing? And if I'm doing something else better, then what am I doing? So it really focuses on that collaboration and ensuring that working together we can make sure that every single one of our students is successful. So our professional development commitment over the past 3 years, the focus of all of our professional development has been on professional learning communities. Now, of course, there have been other things that we've had as far as professional development, but that central focus has remained on PLCs. And so I'm just going to go through kind of a timeline of what we did, why, the bumps that made us shift, and all of those things. So, the focus on collaboration, one thing that we also did as a guiding coalition is we collaborated with other districts and other professionals and other people who have been doing this longer than us. I'm going to share with you some different articles if you want to read a little bit more about it. One of them that just talks about what is a professional learning community is from 2004. This is not new. And there are districts all over the country who have been doing it for a long time. The school district that is considered kind of the birthplace of PLC is Adelaide Stevenson High School in Lincolnshire in Chicago. And they are consistently ranked as the top high school in the nation. And they will tell you all of that is because of their focus on collaboration in their district. So we've learned too, as we've collaborated with other people, we've sent, which I don't even have on here, we've sent lots of teachers to Adelaide Stevenson to see what they do to work with the teachers directly and with their administrators as well, to kind of get a picture of. And one thing that we keep hearing over and over is the only way you fail in PLC is if you stop. So you will continue to to get better and better and better at it, which I think is what you heard from my colleagues tonight. So starting at the very beginning, the first thing that I want to say is that board approval for Wednesday early release was a game changer. Another thing that you'll hear from districts that are trying to start this work is that if you don't have it in the structure of your school, it cannot work successfully. The last thing we can do is say to teachers, we're going to focus on collaboration, find time to do it. It doesn't exist. So having that built into the structure of the day there for them is really the only way that we can do it successfully. So then in July of 22, we created that first district guiding coalition and went to our first PLC at Work conference. We took 8 people, the 4 of us here, 4 additional people, and we were going to run with it. And we got there and we started learning, and minds were blowing, and we were talking till like late at night because we were so excited. And then we realized, holy cow, we need more people. 8 people cannot do this work. But we did take all of the knowledge that we learned in July. We came together and we created sort of a mini conference, and we did a PLC kickoff with leadership teams in our different schools in August of 22 in preparation for getting started. What we learned with that is that, of course, we need more people to be able to understand it, but also all of the excitement that we were bringing back and all of the, the knowledge, even though we hadn't even implemented, while they were listening, and it was like, this all sounds great, and then ready, go, nobody knows what to do. Well, what do we do now? And then what do we do next? And it's kind of like what Michael was talking about, where he said, they get that first task done, and then it's like, now what, and now what, and now what? And we knew we didn't want to, like the top-down approach where, the administration is telling everybody what to do, but at the same time, if they don't have any clarity about what the next steps are, they don't even know how to operate. So that first year was a lot of growing pains of our district's guiding coalition. Now we have expanded it, right? So in August, we started to expand to ensure we had somebody from every building. And then we started sending all of our district guiding coalition members to the conferences so that they would have that better understanding and clarity. And also all of our building principals, because you have to have that leader in the building to be able to support the teams. So that's essentially August 22 through December of 23. We brought in all of our PLC conferences for that group of people. Then we focused each of our Institute Day keynote speakers on the PLC process as well. So in January of 23, we had Jack Balderman, who is a superintendent up north and leads schools that are PLC, what's the word I'm looking for?
Model schools.
Model schools, yes. And he came in as a consultant in January of 23. And then the next January, we brought in Dr. Cruz, who is one of the big leaders in PLC. And so what we learned each time when Jack Balderman came in, we got a little more information. Our staff probably wasn't as ready for it then because they still didn't have that clarity that they were looking for. By the time Dr. Cruz came in a year later, everybody was like, oh, now it all makes sense. So it was just that continued evolution of continuing to give that same information over and over until everybody had that clarity. And then this past May through July, we had a PLC at Work Institute of all of our building leadership teams. So now we've expanded. So now we have a district guiding coalition that includes somebody from each building, and they all have attended an institute. And then we realized we really have to have a core team at each building, in addition to that one guiding coalition person that can help lead the work, that can help support the teams, that can answer the questions. Because if you heard what Nikki said and you heard what Michael said, you heard a lot about autonomy. And so they have very structured just things in place for each of their teams, but it looks very different at different levels. And it looks different in different buildings, as long as there's consistency in what the expectations are. So we wanted to make sure that the teams could guide that work within each of those buildings. So then we started taking each building leadership team and sending them out to conferences, because the one thing that our guiding coalition, every time we met with our guiding coalition and we said, how can we better support the implementation and the clarity of teachers really understanding what it is that they need to do and why it's important and why it's going to lead to student success. Because just saying, you need to do this because if they don't see results in their kids, teachers aren't going to do that. They want to see results with their kids. They want to see that success. So they said we have to get as many people to those institutes as possible because that clicks. That gives you enough information to say, okay, now it makes sense. Now I feel like I can do the work. And so we're proud that we have sent almost 200 people to PLC at Work conferences across, very local conferences and other places, depending on the time of the year and when summer school was and all of those decisions that we had to make about which conferences to go to. And it really has been a game changer in getting us to the point where we have that critical mass of people that truly understand it. And then the sort of final step was then to take those teams, now they have the knowledge, they understand the process, and now have them work together, give them the time where they can work together as a building leadership team to say, okay, now how do we take all this knowledge and how do we lead our buildings? And so that's when we brought in our PLC Coaching Academy. So that's kind of like that final step of now you've gone through the clarity, the why, understanding the process, and now how do you actually lead the work? Because while we need our building principals to support the teams, we have to have colleagues that are really leading all of that work in the buildings. So then our PLC Coaching Academy started in August, and we have a coach at each level. So we have an elementary coach and we have a secondary coach that meets for 2 days with each building leadership team and just kind of works through, some shared learning, and then, okay, now work together with your team and how are you going to push that forward? And at the end of each of those coaching sessions, then the teams go back with sort of a task that they do throughout the first few weeks of the school or the time in between each coaching session, and then we come back again and meet together. So as just to give you the timeline, in August we had that first PLC coaching session, and then the next one is at the end of October and the 1st of November. We'll have session 2, and then the third and final session will be in January. And then we will have, really all of the groundwork set that we need to ensure that we can really start to see that success that you were speaking to, Jennifer. And then another thing in here, the District 7 Institute Day on October 31st aligns with this coaching academy. So while our leadership teams are at the coaching academy, the rest of our staff will be at the District Institute, which has a PLC focus as well. So there's they will be doing the same learning, just it'll look a little bit different for those leadership teams and then the rest of our staff. So that just gives you sort of an overview of where we were, why we did what we did, and why we focus sort of all of our efforts into ensuring that our teachers can be successful and that they can feel confident in what they're doing. We'll leave you with this as just sort of an image of the 6 essential characteristics of a PLC, that focus on learning that we've talked about, collaborative culture, collective inquiry, and into best practice and current reality. And best practice is so important because if you remember back to what Lauren was saying about the collective inquiry being such a strong factor in student success, John Hattie, who's the researcher that she talks about, will say that most of what teachers do in the classroom is successful in promoting student learning. But some things are better than others, and that's what we need to really make sure we're focused on. It's not about, did I teach better or did you? It's about which strategy is really more successful in getting students where we need them to be. And then I also, like I said, have some information that I'll leave with you guys. This is just a quick flyer that gives you sort of a big picture of PLCs, if you're interested, and then a longer article about sort of the birth of PLC and what it is and what it looks like. So, question?
I just want to commend teachers and administrators for doing this work, because it's not easy. It's not easy to, especially if you're a veteran teacher, to branch out and do something different and look at it differently. So really encouraged by what y'all have shared today, and encourage you to keep moving forward with it. Really excited to see it.
Will we continue sending teachers or staff members to conferences, or?
Not nearly to the scale we have been.
Okay.
But I think there always will be new people coming in. There, we've kind of talked a little bit about the evolution of the changes in teams. So, heaven forbid when Nikki leaves the district, at some point, we will need an English person sitting at the table to be able to represent English, and so that's when that turn will happen. So for building principals and those key people, yes.
I will say though, sending folks to the PLC at Work conference more than once
Mhm.
is a huge beneficial investment.
Mhm.
Because when you go, and this is just my own personal experience, but when you go, you focus on one thing and you go, oh, okay, I get it. And then the next time you go to a conference, you're like, I didn't hear that the first time, but oh my gosh, that is so critical and so important. It's just because when you're there the first time, you're not ready to hear anything past what you need. And there is so much there to learn.
We've
So-
heard that over and over again from the people who have been to
Yes.
multiple,
Yeah.
for sure.
And for those of us that went the very first time when we were really green and we knew, that we said, we know we have to do this work, we don't know how.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got to figure out how, but the work needs to be done. And then once they started doing it and then went again, that's, and really too, the conferences is not something that we have historically done in our district widespread, but it's an investment in our people.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately in our kids.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And so when it comes to creating a budget, then to keep that in mind becomes very, very important to the money side of the house, is making sure that we understand what an investment it is.
Tara, how many people are on Guiding Coalition right now?
District Guiding Coalition, about 35, I believe, because we also have some of our coaches and.
Sorry, Bob.
No, I was just gonna say, I love what you're doing. I love to draw parallels, and I appreciated your game sort of scenario. Having worked in the manufacturing world, this is what they would call quality control. This whole process, the whole quality control loop and everything. And so, it sounds new for education, but manufacturing's been doing it for years. And so there are a lot of commonalities among all that. And so I really appreciate the collaborative nature, even though you're not putting out widgets, you're putting out students, and it's all about that loop. So, good job.
I would like, if or when we have another group to talk about this, to have some, like an elementary or, whatever, just to represent a different stage of teaching and how their perception is and how it's improved or helped or whatever their teaching abilities, so.
I'm sure this isn't the last you'll hear of PLCs.
And I've been
And
asking
Lauren-
for 2 years,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
keep saying it's not quite time yet.
And Lauren directly supports our elementary.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're welcome
Okay.
to ask.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe this is the third rail asking this question, but just from a consistency across the days of the week perspective, having that one day from the parent perspective is kind of hard from a scheduling perspective. Is there a way, are we looking into structural ways to maybe provide a more sort of same schedule every day for the students with regard to sort of the beginning and the end of the day, or are we looking at that, or?
We've not discussed that at this point.
Is there anything that, just with PLCs in general, that talks about teacher satisfaction? And I would think that teachers would be happier, and not saying they're not, but it just seems that there's more support and more ability to do your job in an easier way. Anything about that, or not really?
I mean, one of our goals in our Guiding Coalition is to collect more data this year, because we have asked, we have sent out surveys to find out what areas they feel like they still need support in over the first couple of years. So that is one of our goals, to collect more data at the end of this year. But as far as just broadly, just more generally, yeah, there's definitely data that supports that collaborative culture and how it impacts just the climate in the building and the satisfaction of teachers once they're in it and they have that,
They know what
that,
they're
yes.
comfortable with the process. Yeah.
Right.
That'll be nice to see that data too. Cool.
If I could speak informally on that, I feel like, again, when we went being very green to this all and coming back thinking about how can we give them what we have, right? Like, how do we translate that? It's so difficult because it seems so easy, but it's not, right? It's so complicated.
It's change.
Absolutely, and I felt initially, you feel that resistance to change from my fellow educators, and I feel like truly this year, again, informally from so many teams that I've spoken with and talked to and offered support to, I keep hearing, I get it. like I finally get it, right? Like I feel like it takes time and it takes that layer of understanding what it is and how to do it and what the next step is. And I feel like now the puzzle is starting to, like, we're starting to see the picture, right? We've been giving them pieces and now it's starting to really, turn into a full picture. And, I think as we've met as a guiding coalition, we're hearing from across the buildings, that we're just seeing that turnover and change. And again, those conversations are occurring outside of Wednesdays, showing that our fellow educators do see the value in this and are benefiting from that collaborative time. And, it's very exciting.
I also had a question. So I took AP Bio last year with Miss Dahl, and she was talking about, like, if we went into a 7-period schedule, it would have to reorder the structure of the course because, like, it's less time for each of her classes each day. So would that reordering come under PLC, or would that be something separate?
Go ahead. You want me to speak on that? If we're looking at a 7-hour day as teachers, we're losing, right, time that we have planned and allotted for. So that would allow for that collaborative team time to reassess how we're using our time and what best strategies we could use and implement to make that time the most beneficial for you all when you're there in class. And Ms. Dahl is a big PLC advocate. She's on our guiding coalition as well. So I am not surprised that she was talking about PLC work and what we do as collaborative teams in order to absolutely fill our time in the most impactful way.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for bringing those all to light for the board and the public who's watching. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. At this time, I would like to invite Alex Metzger, the district architect, and the Lincoln Middle School construction team to join our meeting to discuss the remodel renovation and bid package 4.
And then I'm going to introduce Damian Schlitt, Justin Classic, and Carrie Lortz with SM Wilson. And they're going to do most of the presentation, actually.
All right. You good to go?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks once again for having us. It's always exciting to be here and talk about the progress we've been making. We've got a lot of updates and exciting new information. So we're going to walk through a really brief overview of kind of what we referred to as phase 1, the bid package 3 work, the addition, just an imagery of what's going on there. I know many of you have gotten to see it on site, but walk through that. And then the majority of our conversation around bid package 4, so the renovation of the 25 and the 60s wing, some updated renderings to that, and graphics and things like that, just to give everybody a clear picture of what that is. So, and the team, please interject when it's parts that you know more about than I do, which is most of it. So phase 1 recap, as far as the scope, I don't know if you want to go through the overall general picture.
So phase 1, or project 1 as we refer to it, you'll hear us call it by several different things, a couple bid packages, but bid packages 1 through 3 are phase 1, and that's really the addition that's moving towards Hadley House. So it's roughly a 60,000 square foot addition. It includes the competition gym, it includes a storm shelter, which is also an annex gym, library, media center, commons, 8 classrooms. It also has a new kitchen and servery. So that's the piece that's getting added on right now.
And you can see the rendering did a really good job of depicting what it actually looks like in real life. So, just some images we've included here, just the renderings for reference, just of kind of where areas were. This masonry work has really turned out pretty amazingly. Just watching the craftsmanship as it's been going up has been pretty remarkable. Here's an image within that main kind of dining commons, the stairway over to the left, restroom set to the right, and then the commons beyond. Kind of a similar image is shown in that top left there, so you can see what is in the process of becoming. Here's an image very near that area, kind of turning, kind of walking over to the right a little bit within that bathroom grouping. You can see the wall here, the half-height walls where the sinks will be located, as you can see in that rendering, and then the visibility out of that space. The bright spots up there, those are some clear story windows, let some nice daylight into that commons area, so it'll be a really nice inviting space for the students. Just another image of that upper commons, kind of looking back towards that bathroom set once again, just to give some clarity on what's happening there. Again, you can see the half-height wall, and then you can see the door frames. Those are the light brown of the individual units that are shown there. Moving to the lower commons area, so this is essentially directly below that area, just walking down those stairs that are on the right. Looking back, towards that end, you can see a similar kind of configuration with the ability to see, the visibility of that area. And then the two renderings on the left kind of show a couple of different vantage points from that portion of the building. As the building happens, I know you probably all experienced it, as you see it first go up in foundations, it feels like so immense. When the hole was dug at first, it's like, there's only going to be one building in that. And then you put up parts of the building and it seems like, oh my gosh, it's so tiny. And then you put up more stuff and it's like, oh, that's kind of what I expected. So these images, kind of show a step beyond even what's there, because as ceilings come in and things like that, actually in some ways things start to feel and look bigger as things get finished out. So Summer, I'll let you kind of walk through that.
So originally, between all of the bid packages and the demolition projects that we've done, the construction piece had a original GMP of $40,526,264. When we say the original GMP, we're talking about construction costs that are being performed on site. That is not the total program piece that includes design cost and FF&E and other things. That original total program was the $44,985,948. So this is the addition piece. As we move forward tonight, we'll talk a little bit about the renovation piece or the rest of the job and how that plays together. So one thing we do want to talk about tonight, so we do have an update on phase one. So we are on track to complete in June of 2025. We have had some remarkable weather that's helped out from a schedule and risk standpoint. We've been able to collaborate through all those bid packages with a great team and a great group of subcontractors that have stayed on schedule. We made it through the summer renovation work, which was a very tight schedule and what we were trying to turn around. And we made it without a lot of surprises. We were able to plan ahead for a lot of those items. And so with that, at this point with us, we're getting glass on site, so the building's starting to get closed, which is a great thing going into winter, so we're avoiding a lot of the risk there. We're able tonight to say that we are going to do a GMP adjustment that will be up for board approval via a change order that would be a negative $1.1 million GMP adjustment to the original GMP. So that original GMP and total program will drop by that $1.1 million.
Good work.
That's great news.
Yeah.
I tell you, Carrie, when we were watching it all come together right before the front, right before school started, I was just like, are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it?
It was a muddy mess.
Never
It was.
Didn't touch it for a minute.
So that 1 million that comes off the 40 or the 44?
It'll come off of both because
Okay.
ultimately when you take that down, the
So
total program drops.
Okay, so
The
total
total
we're looking
program
at
cost.
But the
4.38.
GMP cost is the 4526.
Yes.
So it technically comes off of that one, but the total program includes that number, so.
Yeah.
What, it's $1 million greater than that. You've already subtracted it
No,
from
we
the.
have
No,
not
you have
subtracted,
not.
not
Okay.
subtracted it yet.
So, wait, it gets even better.
It does,
And
right?
and I think it's important to point out, there is still contingency built into the rest of the project. So when we get to the final dollar amount, whatever it is next summer, there's a chance, pretty good chance it'll still be less than that. We'll still get another credit back.
Correct. We're looking at the risk associated with certain items and really trying to find what that risk potentially could be and trying to allocate for that. We've been able to secure materials, secure pricing, lock things in, and schedule-wise, we are well on track for what we're doing. We've been able to collaborate through multiple bid packages and not had a lot of surprises or things that we had to work through, and that's why we're able to do this tonight at where we are in the project.
What was the contingency number total for the first phase?
It was 5% of the total GMP amount. So
Okay.
that's built into the GMP. It's
Yeah.
5%.
Okay, 5%, okay.
Yep.
So we've used like contingency.
We have not gone into that. We've used allowances and things like that for items that we knew were coming up, but we have not jumped into the actual contingency piece for true contingency items.
And I guess it's the hope that that's going to transfer over to the phase 2 if it doesn't get used.
So ultimately, we're looking at these as two separate projects. So in the grand scheme of the program of Lincoln, yes, it would transfer from one to the next. As far as contractually, there'll be a deduct from this program.
So potentially more than the 1.1 if that contingency is not used.
So we'll take the 1.1 now,
Okay.
and we'll reduce that.
You're
and then we
comfortable,
get to
you're
the end.
comfortable with that?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
as we move forward and we get to the end of Project 1 and the addition's done, we will reconcile that GMP to a final number. We'll do the hopefully deductive piece of that at that point, and then Project 2 at that point is well on its way.
Okay, cool.
All right, so phase 2, project 2, bid package 4, there's a project of a million names, but really just wanted to walk through this. We had kind of touched on it a few different times as we worked through the design. Jill caught an image that we didn't have a column in. We have the column shown now. So, we've talked about that for months. We said we had a board member realize there wasn't a column somewhere that we missed. So we made sure that shows up. But yeah, we want to show you some imagery, and then ultimately Carrie's going to walk through kind of the bids that were taken for this. Because originally in the package, just to give everybody the history, it was broken down that there could be 7 packages was kind of the conversation. Just for design considerations and ease of coordination, we essentially put 4 through 7 into this bid package 4. So this is the remainder of the scope at Lincoln. So at this point, everything's been bid out for that campus. So go ahead, I'll let you touch this.
All right. So back in January, we presented to the Facilities Committee a project that looked very similar to the addition. So we went through that estimate and came back and said, high level, if we were going to do everything that we were talking about, we're talking about a 46,641. When we did that, we were making a lot of assumptions. We were trying to understand what the impact to woodland pickup and drop-off would be, what the softball field, tennis court, the track piece of this, all these ancillary pieces that all have to work together, as well as the phasing and pieces of that. So when we actually got to the GMP and things that have evolved, we're able to say that the proposed GMP tonight is the 46,351,217. I said proposed tonight, that's what we're saying tonight. It will go through recommendations with the Facilities Committee and then be up for formal board approval during the normal board meeting.
And what I just provided to the board are the tabulation documents from all the bids received.
Right.
That Carol will be referencing as he kind of talks through.
And so while a lot of these subcontractors happen to be the same ones, we did do this as an open bid. We publicly advertised, we reached out, received decent interest for a lot of packages. And there were some packages that we received one bidder or 1 or 2 bidders. And so when we go through that, we get those bids, we go through the evaluation process, and we're able to come up with what that GMP is. So that renovation piece it's heavy renovation. So during that facilities committee back in January, we had the discussion of, when we go in and we want to make the renovation look like the new addition, that's a heavy renovation. That's removing old walls. That's removing 40, 50 years of history of things going in there. It's fixing floors that are up and down and really trying to make, even within Lincoln itself, an equitable experience for teachers and students from one side to the other. It's all new infrastructure. It's new finishes. It's replacing the windows that over the years have been patched and things, and really giving the whole exterior of Lincoln a facelift and looks brand new, as well as the exterior things I've mentioned, the track, the tennis courts, the new pickup drop-off. One of the things we really focused on is separating buses from students from faculty and trying to keep those 3 entity separate, and that involves a lot of site work, especially because Lincoln's in the side of a hill. There's 38 feet of elevation gain from one side to the other. So there's a lot that went into how that all worked, as well as trying to keep accessibility in mind and equitable experience in mind throughout.
As a northerner, that's like a mountain. Wow. So I'm going to talk through just kind of the design. Much of this is refresher. There weren't any major kind of hard turns or anything, but just a refresher of kind of the scope and generally the configuration. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me, and happy to kind of jump in. So Carrie mentioned the addition with the 60,000 square feet. We are renovating about 90,000 square feet, and this scope, as we alluded to earlier, really is happening from the start of this summer. We had the 25 main entry portion all the way through the summer of 27 by the time everything's said and done with demolition and site work and all that. One of the key pieces of this is handicap accessibility. So throughout the building, not only elevator access, but making sure that kind of every space within the facility has that accessibility, which is a kind of baseline consideration with this type of work that we're looking at. Carrie mentioned the classroom and corridor renovations. As we started early, some of it was fitting spaces into it as we identified the desire to match the aesthetic and the kind of level of fit and finish. You'll see quite a dramatic change once the project's done, even in those existing bones, if you will, of a facility. And then really, one of the pieces, just as a reminder, the offices and student support space on that first floor. You see some of that's done today. We'll continue that through this next phase, which is really a key piece that kind of changed in the design of how we could keep this monumental kind of historic front door as our campus front door. So just quick overview of that kind of south end of the campus. This was something that, when we began the design of this project, ebbed, flowed, changed. The woodland drop-off lane, the lower parking area, the softball field, that car drop area, all those pieces, while they all seem like 5 different notes, are so ingrained with one another that without one happening, the other can't happen. So what you'll see here is that new staff lot, really the elevation needed to be adjusted there to allow the rest of the work to occur on the site. Carrie mentioned kind of that Lincoln is in a hill, and the softball field is actually kind of set in that hill. So there's some retaining walls that needed to be continued around the back side of that to allow our car drop lane to kind of go up, not undermine our sports fields, and then drop down around that south entry. We've got some renderings that to present to you that south entry there, so you can see kind of what visitors would see. This is all done in conjunction with the woodland drop-off lane and adjustments to that site all occurring kind of at once. So, every time we would be working through it in design and say, well, that's a woodland lot thing. Well, the reality was it was a Lincoln lot consideration or concern too. So you can see how that's kind of worked out, and we think will work well for the way that traffic needs to flow on the site.
So that lane that to the left of the new softball field, that is the current lane that is there right now? No, it's all going to be changed. Okay.
The entry.
Okay.
So the apron where you come off of 157, that's the same apron. We are actually, I don't even know if we're widening it, but we're providing 2 separate turn lanes out, a left turn right and a right turn lane only. But essentially when you're coming up right now, you go straight up. So where that dash line is, that's where the drive goes now. We are actually curving it closer to Woodland, almost cutting into that hillside where that other parking lot is now.
So, and I don't, we may not know this, but how big of a degree drop off from the Woodland, I guess, drop off area is it down to the road? I mean, because in bad weather, I could see that potentially,
It's not any steeper than the current drive we had.
It is less steep. It is substantially less steep than what currently had, and that was in coordination. Oates, the civil engineer, coordinated with the fire department of what their recommendation was for that. The apron really is not changing elevation-wise, but overall, by running that like we're talking about and having the retaining walls around the softball field has allowed us to really drop that down by having a longer distance to travel over to get up that elevation.
So currently, the lot up at Woodland has how many parking spots? Do we know? I mean,
I'll ballpark
Okay.
30-ish,
30,
maybe,
so-
maybe a
so
little
we're
bit
gonna
more
go
than
down-
that.
In that
Go
upper
down
parking
to-
lot?
Yeah.
to just a few parking spots, and a lot of that.
Up there, correct, but we are overall, I think we're more than our current parking spaces, the overall projected for the end of the project, because don't forget, we've cut it off the picture here, but there's a larger parking lot between Hadley and the addition.
Sure.
And then we do have the parking spaces, the parallel spaces in the front of the bus parking lot now, and then we'll have that entire staff lot.
But there's currently no intention for that road that you see but connecting the softball field lot and where Hadley is at all, right? That's
That
gonna
is
be-
not for public use.
Right.
That is for strictly the fire department, emergency services, to make sure we can get around the back, and obviously maintenance staff can use that as well.
Okay.
So,
So we're expecting parents to come through, loop around, and then loop back down out to 157.
So
Yeah.
just,
So-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just, how much is the addition of the softball field and all that, and, you know, as far as the total of everything else?
So that is a very tricky question.
Okay.
Because the whole design and the idea of coming around is based on having that flat spot there. So there, when we talk about what that number is, yeah, there's a flat, field that drains right there that doesn't have a fence and doesn't have dugouts and things like that. There's a number for that, but if there's also a number that get rid of the retaining walls and that's more of a hill, we can provide both those to you of rough estimates. If you're not looking for what it costs to add that piece, that's harder because we'd have to unwind, like, what would we do if we didn't do that?
Okay. So it was baked in from the beginning?
After we did the January presentation at facilities and we said, okay, if we're providing an equitable experience to Liberty and Liberty has this, then that was one of the items that was talked about is, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then we came back with, okay, this is how we're going to achieve that.
So that decision was made in the facilities
I don't know about that. I know when we were talking about the option.
The decision made to design, the decision
Yeah, I
was
mean,
made
I'm
to
just
do.
curious, you know, I mean, 'cause,
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't like, 2 years ago, that wasn't part of the thought process.
It was at the very beginning, it was part of the thought
Oh,
process.
okay.
Yeah, tennis courts and softball fields were part of the thought process at the very beginning.
Where are the tennis courts?
They're just to the north of the track.
Okay.
There was that, the asphalt lot, that had
Okay.
the basketball hoops, is in that location.
So as we talk through phase two, I want to point out two things. Number one, you have to throw everything you know about Lincoln out the window because the elevation's 100% changed. So when you think about that upper lot, it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It's now a slope, right? You have to think about the lower lot at a very different elevation than it currently is because it goes up
Goes up about 6 to 8 feet.
6 to 8 feet. And then you have to think about trying to phase all of this while we're having school, right? So everything that they have done is really in the phasing process of what can we do from this point to this point, and then we gain access to a different space, and now what can we do then? We also don't do asbestos abatement at all when kids are in the building, so that's a big piece because that limits how much we can get done in the summer, both on the renovation side and on the abatement side. And then we have to figure out pick up and drop off and where that all fits if we touch lots. So try to take everything you know about elevation, take that upper lot out, take that lower lot out, because it's all changed in the new model that starts this coming summer 25. So with that, I'll hand it back off to you.
You had a question?
I did. So parents queue up all the time. They usually park up in that upper lot or they queue along 157.
Correct.
Do we need to provide some kind of queue lane?
And so that's the intent for this new pickup drop-off. So you'll come up that hill and you'll loop around. And so we have all the queuing from pretty much, can you go to the front of the queue line?
Down here?
No, top. So they'll start parking there and it'll be double lane around that loop. So we can double stack cars over
Okay.
to there and then we can single stack all the way down to 157.
Okay.
And I think parents are doing a great job with with pick up and drop off this year. Actually pulling onto the curb, or onto the shoulder there. We're not blocking West Street anymore, so I think they're doing a wonderful job. And this is just to help them and help us to do it a little bit safer even for the students now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then Woodland would be a similar kind of stance. Obviously, Woodland is after Lincoln for pickup, so you kind of go down that same route down Lincoln, and then you'll loop into the woodland and you can double stack over at their
I
kind of
see.
northern entrance to that side there. And then again, as you come out, you'll have dedicated right turn lane only and left turn lane only. Because I know it gets a little tricky coming out of 157 right now.
So just out of, like, to put it all in perspective, the current gym comes out to where?
To right about there.
Okay.
Because
gonna
you
be a
said
big
that
change.
dash line
Yeah,
is
it's
now
huge.
the present,
That's about where the road's at, correct?
Yeah, you can kind of see the curve right
so.
in this
Right,
drawing,
oh, yeah.
right there.
Yeah, so that drive actually comes at a weird juxtaposition to that gym.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to, you don't realize it when you're driving up on it, but in plan, it's a little more aggressive than what you
Do
assume.
you not highlight all the retaining walls, just so people get an idea?
All the dash, right?
All the dash lines.
All the dash lines are some sort of retaining wall, so the track is held up by one as that slope comes down. As we come around the softball field to level that piece out, and then in front of the staff parking lot, as we raise that up, and that, we have to even phase how that comes in to make sure that we keep that pickup and drop off happening.
Having grown up in Southwest Virginia, if you need some examples, I know a couple of baseball fields you could go to
Yeah.
find out how to build inside a mountain.
Yeah,
As well as the drive all at Woodland.
yes.
Oh, yes, this is all.
So is that in dark green, that curved roadway? What is that?
That's a fire lane. So to make sure that we can get back to Woodland in case of a fire, Emergency Services has a path similar to Liberty, but we're actually going to pave it going around. So maintenance can use it, fire trucks can use it, emergency personnel can use it. Because that drive that currently goes around the left side of Woodland, it's not, we're not advocating for anyone to use that route. And we're actually going to be kind of closing it down, as no one should be driving on that.
Okay.
Any other questions on site? We can always come back to it if something comes to it. All right, so I'm gonna real quick go through these. As you'll recall, we've essentially got 3 levels of the building, but we also have the lower level with this phase, big package 4, the second phase. So within the context of the building, one of the things that occurred as we were working through this was this lower level actually became kind of a elective zone with ag and art living down here. As we were identifying different spaces and kind of making sure the programming worked with what the educators were requesting, this space just made a lot of sense for this programming. This move actually was what allowed our orchestra and band spaces to kind of expand a little bit and kind of fill that footprint. So again, we were kind of learning as we worked through it to make sure the spaces all worked. Scope didn't really change. It was just a matter of what rooms were going to be within that space. Moving up to the first floor, we're really going to focus kind of from the yellow areas to the left. At the far left, again, this is the area that we've referred to as the knuckle. You'll see the classroom spaces are very similar to how they've been laid out before. We looked previously in meetings about that kind of lobby space, student gathering outside of the auditorium, which we've got some renderings updated to show you. One of the things that we, again, is that scope kind of review and understanding the design of the overall program was the auditorium work. A little bit more work there to make sure that it wasn't kind of that space that was left behind. This is the time to take care of it. The organization at this area here was really the 6th grade wing. So you'll see the 2 science areas, and then you'll see the classrooms kind of wrapping around the rest of it. Again, giving some nice kind of seclusion to the 6th grade wing. It kind of can operate as its own thing, but also has easy access going through the admin suite over to those common use areas, like the commons and gyms, things like that. You'll notice at the top of this plan some of the adjustments really with curricular storage and general building storage. The drama area was able to grow a little bit with some dressing rooms there that serve right off the stage zone. And then that choir, just general music area that also has the adjacency with the auditorium. So this whole first level kind of works well for those kind of partnered programs. To the right-hand side of the auditorium, just as a reminder, that is the kind of circulation corridor that we added. This is at both levels. You'll see some images of graphics there. It really just helped with the organization of the building. So again, 6th grade is living to the left of that. 7th and 8th graders come downstairs, walk down that to get back to choir and drama areas without needing to circulate through that 6th grade zone. Because that's one of the things is we were trying to rethink and reorganize a 1925 building attached to a 1960s building was how do we get around and how do we not make people passing kind of through areas they don't need to be in. And that was one of the ways we were able to do that.
So the walls where the drama storage, the general music and whatever's there to the top of that, are those new walls or is that existing building?
Those are, the outside of it's existing building.
Okay.
It's skinned.
Inside you're just changing.
Inside
you're
we're changing,
adding
yeah.
walls. Okay.
And one wall, this wall here actually is existing pretty much, I'd say 90% of it. That's a heavy bearing wall,
Okay.
which was another part of our conversation of what rooms fit where, because taking that out was not an option.
Sure.
So,
That's currently the locker rooms underneath the small gym.
The gym.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So sliding to the right, some of this, if you've gone over and toured it recently, you've gotten to, which portion of this all is done? It's this side? Oh yeah, and here.
Yep.
Over delivered. So this entire area has been completed, kind of the attendance office, nurses area, and then the main building admin space. Across the corridor, you'll see really student services, I mentioned that earlier, conference spaces, guidance type areas, site, teacher's lounge, all those types of areas. So again, this kind of gives a central hub of that administration for the campus between the addition, which can be seen to the right, and then the extent of the existing building to the left.
So on this plan, as we talk through the phasing, so summer of '25, so the intent is that we finish the rest of the first floor over summer to allow that passageway into the new addition as we open it, so that will be an inside way to actually get through that. That's part of why we did what we did last summer to move things around and get a part of that done. That'll allow us to continue construction without interrupting the kids' flow between the new addition and the existing building.
And you'll get to see some images in a moment here, but just as a reminder, this is our front door to our campus, so this is our secured location. We're greeted there. We can be checked into the main office, if you will, with the reception space, the principal's office, bookkeepers in that area, or the attendance office, which is across the other direction with our SRO office or on the corner there. So this really is kind of, that one secured location, but, between whatever 8 and 3, if you will, where visitors and students would enter the building. Moving up to the second story, so similar breakdown kind of just by building, but what you'll notice here at the knuckle portion, if you will, was really divided into, I'd say 3 main programs. One is the Castle program with those spaces, sensory spaces, SEL spaces, support for those programs. At the left, you'll see flex classrooms as well as the foreign languages. And then at the top, you'll see a reconfiguration for band and orchestra. Originally we had a general music space in that footprint too, so you can see here just the flexibility that gave us with some of those other adjustments. With that band and orchestra area, you'll see the practice rooms and offices, shared storage between them. They do essentially inhabit that corridor space out front, so that's where instrument storage would be, so students can grab their instruments as they go into their spaces. Allows those spaces to just function more wholly, because they don't have to also be a storage room for instruments. Also lets the flow of students work a lot better, because they're putting instruments away or getting them out of the room when other students can be heading in to get prepared for their class. Down there at the corner again, the Castle program, there was a lot of discussions that were had with that space. Likely moved walls around that area more than any other space in the building, just because we needed to get right. Like, we needed to understand who was going to work with whom, and what access and what was being prioritized. So I think we came up with a really great working solution. You can see the SEL room on the left and the right. Both have access from the outside of the suite, if you will. which is just the way that programming works. We also have the speech space there, the single-use toilet room. So it's kind of an ecosystem of how it operates. Just north of that, you'll notice a ramp. That's currently not an accessible slope, and we're actually able to change this out. Again, this is one of those points where getting accessibility everywhere, we can pass down that to make sure the entire building, students can pass through without issue. We did need to create a ramp in our elective corridor, that connecting corridor to the right as well. You'll see that down arrow in the white box there. Just because with existing buildings, for some reason, they don't build them all at the same floor elevation. But we deal with it. So there's also a slight slope to that floor. It's not a ramp, it's just the floor slope. So there's not a need for rails and things like that. It's just a gradual decline. One last piece, just as a reminder, because we also have a slight change of elevation here too. This was one of the areas, again, with circulation and creating flow, creating this small addition across the roof area here that, again, just kind of allows students to access and get in these programs from multiple directions, so we're not having pinch points. And our 6th graders could come right up the stairs here and get over to band without ever crossing paths, with 7th or 8th that might be coming down that direction.
Because as you might know, that gym right now is only accessed by 2 staircases on either side. So there is no access from that current floor unless you're cutting across the balcony of the stage, which most people don't have access to.
I think it's important to note too that we took advantage of the volume space of that existing gym, so that music space is there, so that volume helped us out tremendously for those types of spaces.
Moving to the right on that plan, you'll see the majority of the 7th grade wing. This is pretty similar to what you saw at 6th grade program-wise, just as far as the number of sections, the small instructional spaces. One of the interesting parts of this program here is we are showing, and again, how offices ultimately get assigned is another discussion, but at that main entry point, you'll notice when you go in there that a part of it is multi-level, but we did actually provide an assistant principal or another administrative office at that 2nd level. Again, just having another adult at that floor, not all the way down at the 1st level there. Some conferencing space. We also have, each of the general educational spaces laid out. And just to go back when drawing, you'll see this 7th grade, this one science lab, right at the end of that hall. It's just where our cut line's at, but this is that other science lab. So we tried to create it, it's kind of divided by teams, so that each end of the hall, if you will, acts as a team. And this does, just as a reminder, does extend directly out into the addition at this end, just like at the 1st level, like Carrie was mentioning. And then this is the new elevator for this end of the campus.
And
it happens right here.
And when we talk about construction phasing, that elevator, even though it's sitting in the renovated space, will be available for the new addition piece. So we're going to take advantage of the ability to actually lock down the wing for an after-hours event and things with the corridor doors and use that as basically our line of construction barriers. We move into the next phase. So that elevator piece and that and the staff toilet and things will be open on that floor, as well as we talked about the 1st floor connector coming through. So that keeps that elevator access for the whole addition.
And that elevator being installed this year was the reason we had to take those 3 classrooms on that northern wing on each floor, is they need all 3 floors to be able to build that space.
And then moving up to the 3rd floor, just as you can see it within the context, this is where the 8th grade program is functioning. And this was another, if you'll notice on the other 2 plans, there's almost a growth of the science labs. That was a conversation that was had, like, we don't need 8th grade labs for 6th graders, but we also don't need 6th grade labs for 8th graders. So with this plan, this is probably one of the changes from the last time we all spoke, but the way the science labs are laid out, that science prep, and that flex office there, again, bringing the ability for an administrator, an adult to live on this floor and kind of be eyes, but also making sure that science programming worked for these grades the way it needed to. Still able to provide the small instruction spaces like we see in some of these areas, and then the other just general programming that we had discussed as well. All right, so a few new images that hadn't been seen yet. So this image kind of does a good job. This is at that south car drop entry. So right now we're standing within the existing gym. You can't see this wall because it's got a gym connected to it. But essentially that's been cut off. And then this is that face. So that's the end of that hallway. When we were talking about the knuckle plan and those plans were extending up to the left of the drawing, that's the end of that hallway and those windows there. We're putting a skin across the face of that because it's going to be exposed. You know, it's within a wall right now, matching with some of the metal that's been used around the rest of the building. As you go around to the left there, up top, those are windows and some cladding where the band and orchestra spaces are. So those are up in that current gym space. We're punching some openings to get some daylight in there. Down below that, we're going to be skinning the existing face, if you will, of the building. Again, part of its foundation and part of its brick, with some brick to match around. But you can start to tell, and if you had it on your phone, you could zoom in. You can see really the way this drive is. You know, to make it accessible, we need it to be a certain flatness. So we can't just have people dropped off at a slope. So we got to get to flat spots so people can get out of cars. So we've got that nice flat drop off. We've got our bollards along here. And then we were able to just create kind of a back and forth sidewalk or sloped walking surface going up to that back courtyard. Allowed us to avoid a lot of, you know, really steep ramps and things like that were just a little bit intrusive. With that, we kind of created these kind of sitting walls that act as both retaining walls, sitting walls, allow that all to work. So this is kind of a microcosm of the hill we're on.
And which, if you think about it, this level here, that's floor 0 we're looking at. The courtyard is at first floor. So that's almost an entire floor that we have to make up with that slope sidewalk.
Yeah.
Trying to put it into visual perspectives.
That's a great point. And you can see just in this image too, kind of this darker, this is that pavement of that fire lane continuing around. You can see some retaining wall from the field there. So this image starts to give you some of that context.
So you would expect students to enter where the double doors are?
Yep.
Or then to walk around, and can they walk around to the back of the building where the courtyard is and enter there, or not?
There would be an option, but I would leave it up to building administration to understand how they want their security to flow.
Okay.
So I assume we're at net negative as far as total dirt removal, I mean, or are we gaining dirt?
No, we're removing a significant amount of dirt. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember that hole I talked about earlier?
Well, and a lot of the dirt we didn't want to keep there anyway.
We only got rid of the back door.
There's
Yes.
some mine shafts nearby.
They're close, but thankfully outside of our perimeter. We're good.
I think he meant to dispose of the dirt.
Yes, yes.
So this is going around to that rear area. So this is really the courtyard that's created. So the current courtyard is like right here, you know, nestled up nicely against the back of the building. But we're removing the entirety of the rest of that building. And what this does is between the addition, we've wrapped that circulation corridor I was mentioning before, and then the back of the existing 25 building. It creates kind of this courtyard space. We've shown paving to allow for, you know, outdoor gathering from the commons and the addition. We also have this area that's just got some steps and kind of some large seating that allows for some gathering of students. Faculty use it for exterior classroom space. Looking at it kind of from a above view, you can also see that, again, grades are everything on this campus. Sidewalk access from over at the field comes up to this area. This area is actually raised, and if you remember in the addition, we had the bathroom and the concession stand in that corner, and it's kind of just at a floating floor elevation. Well, here's that floor elevation. So it allows that to function as that support for outdoor gatherings of that. You can see here, we try to keep it simple with the steps there, but allow for some gathering and some use, so it doesn't always require furniture for all the use, but there is the ability to kind of furnish it with some outdoor patio tables and do that. We had some conversations, and I think we got to discuss exactly the logistics, but you know, ag programs, things like that. We don't just want to make it a concrete you know, the whole paved space. So we left some green space that, you know, we can decide development of that now or in the future. You get a teacher that wants to, you know, sponsor something, there could be some potential for that green space.
The other thing to point out here is when we talk about that elevation that the concession and restrooms are at, so that's at track elevation. So that's roughly 3 foot below that first floor, or 3 foot above that first floor elevation. And you can start to see the ramps and how that ties into the locker rooms and things. But you can start to see how that starts to fall as you get past that crosswalk to head towards that pickup drop-off point.
Yeah, so as you come up that sidewalk, this is the one that we said was just a sloped sidewalk. It gets up to essentially this elevation, so you can get accessibly into the building, they can get to the courtyard. We do have some ramping that happens along back by the road, and then again this ramping out here. So yeah, but we were able to minimize it, and it's kind of a feature of organizing the space as opposed to being a thing we didn't want to have to deal with. Also, just as a reminder, this is the access into the locker room area. So as athletes come across, they go right into that lower locker room zone. And then just some reminders or updates, refresh on some of the interiors. So it's been a really exciting project, just the way the graphics have kind of helped to tell the story of the history of the building and you know, just kind of its future, if you will. So this is an image right in that 25 area, so you can see outside a little bit through there. So this is the SRO office. We tried to create some transparency with this as well as with the main office space. But you can see the medallion, some of the patterning in the floor, just to kind of break up the corridors, give some life to it, kind of bring in that aesthetic. I think we'd spoken at one of the meetings about how the ceilings worked and things like that. And what you'll see here is really kind of creating some soffits along the sides, but putting in the dropped 2x2 ceiling. Still, the way that it's designed, it still gives you some elevation feel, but didn't require a whole lot of cleanup of utilities and structures and all those types of things that would have happened if we left that open that we were talking about in some of these 25 areas. Kind of turning around from there and looking back, those guidance areas do have some glass. They've got some privacy films and things like that, but again, we're trying to not make it feel like just a double-loaded 1925 building with a bunch of walls on the sides. We want some visibility in and out. This allows daylight to get into this space from the courtyard side and the front, so you can see some of that life coming through. Jill, there's your column.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll paint your name on it if you want.
That's the Bertles column.
So this is just an updated image kind of that area. It's a little disorienting just because it's at an angle and the image is at a corner. So, you know, with the way the floor works, but, you know, remember this is kind of where that 22.5 degrees happens in the building. But this is that kind of area we created a teaching wall, also integrated some of the graphics. So this is what the 6th graders are going to, you know, start out at Lincoln experiencing on a daily. It's kind of walking by this type of experience. You can start to see down the hall. We've got some images more directly of it, but just some of the room graphics bring some identity to spaces and, you know, again, not just being barren walls with just room signage on the walls.
In this location in general, we've done a lot of work to try to open up that space. So right now, as you come down that 1925, you've got to make a right turn, a left turn, and then finally you can turn right again and continue down the left side hall. So trying to really straighten that out, give good visibility to the left and to the right. So essentially to that right, you can look all the way down to the staircase that takes you up to the 2nd floor in the new addition, if your eyesight's that good. But it's all about trying to open it up, making it much easier to navigate around if you're a student, also for teachers and staff to see everything going on.
Yeah, it's a great point, because originally the hallway in here was offset from where we've got it here. So it required kind of some space planning to make the rooms work and create this organization. So it's a great point. This is just kind of turning and looking down one of those corridors. You can see what we're trying to do is bring some interest to that ceiling, so it wasn't just felt like you're walking down a never-ending ceiling of 2x2 ceiling tiles. Bringing some of that color into the floor surfacing, which again just kind of breaks down the monotony of really long, a lot of times in a, like you saw in the addition, it's not just a double-hooded corridor, there's a lot of kind of undulation to that and kind of small areas to gather. Well, when you're dealing with an existing facility, there's columns there, so you can't just push and pull into them. So how do you create some of that excitement? And one of those things is just by providing some daylight at the end of that. That is one of those windows that would look out to that south way. So that doesn't quite look like.
Those are Damien's trees.
Yeah. There are a couple of those in these images.
And there will be lockers on the sides?
Yes.
Yes. This is an image at the connecting corridor. This is the first or second floor? Do you remember?
So
That's the second one.
This is second.
Yep.
So on those two floors, we've got some glass that looks out to the courtyard, but we wanted some really big, bold graphics, so at night, they could be lit up and you could kind of get glimpses of this. So again, just trying to take every opportunity, especially in these areas where there's kind of nothing happening except for circulation, that kids continue to kind of be engaged with what's going on around them. This is back at that corridor behind the castle program. So again, another opportunity of just a reminder of what's going on and the excitement. We worked really closely with the admin team and the district admin team just to kind of understand, what was the message, what was some of the language that's being used in the building already, and we could kind of emphasize that through these different types of graphics. And that's
Carrie, would you mind just highlighting real quick some of the MEP things that are happening at Lincoln and what that looks like?
So overall, when we talk about MEPs and how we were originally talking about the program, MEPs were very high on our list on replacements and making sure that we were doing things appropriately. So
What does MEP stand for again?
Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then there's also FP, which is fire protection. So Lincoln was not a sprinkled building, so it will be a fully sprinkled building. All of the utilities are going to enter into the new addition. They're currently being installed now and then fed from there. If you know anything about the old Lincoln, it actually had 3 different electrical services and 2, maybe 3 water services. We're still not sure. And so when we talk about that, that's multiple places for failure, multiple places to maintain. So we're really simplifying all that, but we're also upgrading it to be energy efficient. We're looking at ways to make sure the technology is appropriately ran, not just for now, but for future. So we're looking at making sure that we're using things that are able to be expanded in the future if need be. And we're really looking at that entire infrastructure piece and making sure we aren't just going through hey, this is the cheapest thing that it is. We're looking at the energy efficiency, we're looking at lifespans, we're looking at the building controls to make sure that when people are there or not there, that comfort level and that energy is taken into account. As well as what we're doing with the exterior skin and making sure that goes in. It's really a holistic approach to making sure we have energy efficient buildings as we move forward, as well as being fully sprinkled, making sure plumbing lines are new. I can say we're going to replace every underground plumbing line that is currently being used throughout this project we go through because it's a priority. Some of those have been in place since 1925. So as we move through the building, that's part of why we had to start at the end we did and work our way through, is that's really where all those services were coming in.
I would imagine too that there's some amount of code that once you touch something, then you kind of have to upgrade as well.
There is, but we're not looking at it just as a building upgrade. We're looking at it collectively as hey, we want to make sure we're doing what's right and what's going to last, because we know while this referendum is touching Lincoln, the next one probably won't. And so we're looking at it long-term, that we're trying to make sure we're using the right materials and using the right things that will last longer than, Alex likes to say that she hopes to never have to touch Lincoln again. So that's what we're trying to do. That's kind of the mindset we're going into this with.
Within the total project costs, so Carrie mentioned phase 2 GMP, total project cost is about $5.5 million higher than that. We have all FF&E, so furniture, equipment, everything is included in phase 1 and phase 2. And based on the early estimates, we're well within that number right now. So that number we're carrying for phase 2 is $850,000. We have $2 million in abatement that we've put in there. That's based on the number we got for next summer for what needs to be abated for Where?
Rest of the first floor of 1925 takes you down to almost the auditorium.
Yep.
The rest of the second floor for 1925 all the way to, including the media center, so all the way down to the auditorium again, and then the entire third floor. And then in addition, the abatement and demolition piece of the cafeteria commons, kind of the rest of that piece that we did 2 years ago. And then the 3-story section of, I call the 1941 building, but next to the elevator. So we took half of that building. So that's also the rest of the abatement there with that. And the demolition is obviously would be through our trade partner on that. But
I'm confused.
I know. It's a lot.
Because here there's a $2 million per
Yep.
abatement, what you're talking
That's
about.
total program abatement.
That's the entire
That would
kit
be-
and caboodle
that would
for
be the
everything.
rest of the building.
Tax, tag, and title at the end of this.
Yep.
We're
Yes.
estimating $2 million for
Yes,
that.
and that number is based on the estimate we've been provided with for next summer's abatement. So we've taken that number, knowing that we have some tight timelines for that, and we're expecting a lot done. And so obviously expecting a lot done means it sometimes costs a little bit more. So taking that number and applying it to the next, 26 and 27 to make sure that we are making sure we're accounting for.
But those are estimates,
With-
those aren't
With
actual bids.
cost,
Correct.
potential increases built into that, or just a flat estimate?
It's
from year
built
to
into
year?
that, yeah.
Okay.
We've also got the 5% contingency that was in phase 1, also in phase 2. So about the same amount of contingency in phase 2.
Yeah, we have not gone out to bid yet for the next abatement piece for 2025. We're working through those drawings now, and then I'm expecting, actually I got drawings today to review for that. So we should be out to bid with that in the next few weeks, hopefully for approval before the end of the year,
But
to
that's
make sure we
not-
lock that in for this upcoming summer.
But that's not part of bid 4, right? Or is it?
It's not in the GMP piece, it's a part of the soft costs that, as the owner, we take on.
Okay.
Abatement is typically not done by our contractors, it's just a risk piece that they prefer not to deal with and keep it on the owner's side.
Okay.
But we do have it
So-
included in the total program.
Correct.
Okay, so I assume that means we're.
As bond,
we're-
as part of bond funding?
Yes.
So it is going to be part of bond funding and not a health life safety?
It is right now.
There's some of it we could potentially take out of health, life, safety, we're just trying to navigate that.
Did the new sprinkler system come out of health, life, safety?
No, that's come out of bond.
It's not about it.
Mhm.
And then we're expecting one company to do all of that work? It's not going to be divided into?
It will be divided.
Okay.
We haven't started planning 26 and 27 yet. I'm hoping to as soon as we get through this next summer. No, sorry. Once we get through the planning process for next summer, we immediately jump into it and try to get that bid out as soon as possible. Because obviously, the earlier you bid it, the more contractors you have, and then the better prices we have. So if 25, we're looking at right now, are we done with 2? I think we're trying to do.
We're 2 packages.
We're trying to do 2 packages. So essentially, it's the renovation piece to abate that, to be able to have Wilson turn that over, and then you have the demolition piece. There are 2 different requirements on how those are done, which is why we're kind of splitting them into 2 packages.
Okay.
Other current questions?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, it's very exciting to see the pictures that we're, hoping to see at the end and the reality, and I appreciate the graphics. It really does, I think, a really good job of framing everything. It does seem like over the last year, though, even though we've been doing the construction work, it still had an impact on the teachers and the administration in general. And so now we're talking about going into a phase where it's going to be even more impact on the teachers and the administration. And my main concern is, where do they go while this is being done? Because they're going to have to move again. And the logistics of that, I mean, we haven't really talked about.
So Alex, why don't you talk about that
Yeah.
process a little bit?
So I have already met with the building administration team. We do need to have another meeting. Michael, I know I need to get that scheduled, by the way. So I need to go through and look at, how many classrooms are we going to have available for next year? How many classrooms do we actually need? How many do we need to build to make sure we have everyone accounted for in a true classroom?
So when you say build, though, that means
That's
in
a
the-
temporary space somewhere
existing-
within
the new gym that we're-
the existing gym right now.
Okay.
We wouldn't put anything into our brand new gym. It would all
Okay.
be within our our current gym.
Okay.
Whether it's on the floor, whether it's on the mezzanines, creating different spaces throughout that area. We are looking in and investigating where we can possibly put these classrooms in. Yes, they're not going to be perfect and great, but we're looking to try to get them to that point.
So Alex, we talked last year as we were preparing for this summer about temp classrooms
Yes.
in the media center. And we built a temp classroom in the media center, right? So describe that classroom for us.
So a temp classroom is true walls. So we've got metal studs, gypboard on both sides, so that's drywall. Insulation inside the wall to minimize sound. We have a ceiling in there. We have all our fire alarms within that. We have a full walking door with a vision light. We have data, we have electric, we have Promethean boards. It's a true classroom. I know I use the word temporary a lot. And my terminology as an architect is a lot different than most people's terminology, just layman terms. So the temp classrooms will be real rooms. They will just only be used for 1 year. I know.
The other piece of this that we started at the very beginning was going through and identifying, and I think Castle's a really good example. They moved one time, and their next move is in their new space. So we tried to be very strategic about 3 years out who has to move and making sure that people aren't moving by year. Now, can't promise that's not going to happen because there are spaces we have to have access to, but ideally, as we progress through, there are going to be spaces in the new space, in the new brand new build, that are classrooms that eventually won't be classrooms. And then there's going to be space in the old place that they're only going to be in a classroom for a year until they move over.
I mean, it'd be great to see a rendering of kind of what that, because I'm having a hard time visualizing what temporary classrooms, and you know, like we're temporary, but you know, in the old gym, and what how that would actually function.
Sure.
You know, because that, I mean, that's asking a lot.
It's a concern. I agree. Yes, we are working through to make sure that is a usable space, and the building administration team is very involved with that. We just need to actually sit down and do our next piece of it, which is being held up on me and my schedule right now.
Okay.
And I know I plan to come back to facilities and kind of talk through that process once we have a better idea of where we're at with those and what we're going to propose from their side and my side, to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page and you guys would agree with that process.
I think it's also important because it did get brought up at one point where everybody talks about trailers and, oh, we'll put a trailer. One, obviously you can see the immense amount of site work that needs to get done. So obviously there is no place to put that.
Yeah, there'd be no way to get to it.
No. Exactly. Well, you get there, but by boat or whatever. But the other part is, it's not like when we were in school and you walked out the back door by the shop and you went to Mr. Butler's social studies trailer out there. They don't do things like that anymore. There's a lot more rules and regulations that go along with trailers, and it's not like it used to be.
Yeah. If you remember, around the time we were voting and we were getting the vote on the bond, we were talking about trailers and what it would take to put trailers, because the only place to put them is on the football field.
Right.
And so we would have to pour footings on the football field to put a trailer, and then now we've got a football field to deal with.
Sand, power, electric.
Correct.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking that was an option. I just, you know, I'm just thinking the logistics.
It quickly didn't become one because of that.
moving.
That's like
because
building
we're
a-
basically, you know, teachers are going to have to move their classrooms twice.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I just brought it up only because, again, other people had brought it up at certain points.
Sure.
But that's why that's not a viable option for.
Yeah. So a couple of things before, as we kind of close up this part, as we look to the 28th board meeting, and then I know we're going to talk about bond at finance, we're going to talk about this at facilities, and then we'll vote on the recommended bid packages. But I wanted to offer, number one, I think it'd be a good idea if you want to walk Lincoln now. I just kind of pulled that out of my back pocket, so I hope that's okay with you all.
It's kind of late for that tonight.
Both, anything for you about nothing but time. We could show you what a current temp classroom looks like. We could walk through some of the potential spaces that we see being used in that way and what that might look like. Also give you a quick update on the new construction because it's framed and it's starting to really take shape. And I will tell you, I was in there 2 weeks ago, and the amount of time that what had been done the past 2 weeks was amazing. So if you'd like to do that, that's certainly on the table for any time prior to the board meeting, and then of course anytime afterwards. But if you'd like to sit down with a member of the district, BLDD, or SM Wilson, we can certainly arrange that individually. If you have questions about the information you got over the weekend in terms of the total dollar amount, the bid packages, the design, any of those things, Justin's local and he can be here anytime. Damien can jump on Zooms pretty regularly and he can come down if we need him to. And Carrie lives down the road, so even though he's got 15 other projects going on. So
Could always come to
We're
a
not gonna
finance
stop
meeting.
by the house.
yeah,
Could always come to a finance meeting. That's a great time to talk money.
yeah. So obviously, we need to make sure that we can schedule those things. So if you're interested in that, if you can let Carrie know tonight, hey, I'd love to take advantage of that. We can get that scheduled in at least groups of 1 or 2 with those people, whoever you want to meet with, and then we can answer questions so that we can kind of work through any of those details that are needed before we get to those meetings.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you. Appreciate
All right,
it.
thank you,
for
team.
staying so
Appreciate
late.
it.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
We have one other discussion item, and attached, the board members will find the 2024 Resolutions Committee report that outlines proposals to be acted upon at the annual meeting of the Illinois Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly in November during the joint annual conference. Every member district is entitled to one voting delegate, and this year delegates will vote on the election of IASB officers, a constitutional amendment, and adoption of the IASB position statements on issues that reflect the interests of the boards of education across the state. So tonight, if we are able to, we could choose one member of our board to be our board delegate, and then Carrie can register them online in advance of the conference, of which there will also be a webinar on October 31st for our delegate who can be registered for to learn more about the assembly process and the voting process. So the resolutions proposed for adoption by the Resolutions Committee. The dual language, EBF authorized charter school funding, tax increment financing accountability, faiths law, centralized state agency for EHRs, and I'm not even sure what that means. Healthcare coverage, polling place, and amendment to position statement 7.08. So those are the resolutions, and I think we've not officially gotten those. Sometimes we get a book with them in the mail, individually, or maybe they've come to
I
the.
don't think you've gotten a book in the mail. I think they came via email.
Yeah, we did
Okay.
an email about it,
Mhm.
but we
Okay.
didn't get a book.
So do we have either discussion on any of those 6 resolutions and/or a volunteer that would like to be our board delegate?
Can we volunteer someone? Oh, I was gonna volunteer you anyway.
That's called
It's good she agreed
voluntold.
to do it.
I just thought if anybody talks about the cell phone issue, then Terry ought to do that, but.
And only
We
one
can
of
work
us.
together on what to talk about,
Okay.
because somebody will have to step up to the speakers and present that.
Okay.
To bring it back forward, back to the discussion for the whole assembly.
Okay.
Can districts have more than one person in the room but only one voter?
No.
No.
I think you can.
Okay,
Probably
you only
pretty
can have
strict.
one person in the room, okay. I was part of that one year and I didn't remember how that worked.
So since you brought up the cell phone resolution, so the district presented a resolution to the School Board Association for cell phone usage, to limit cell phone usage in schools across Illinois. The Resolutions Committee recommended do not adopt, but there are 3 categories that they can put it in. They can put it in recommended for adoption, recommended to not adopt, and recommend do not present. Do not present are not on the table, they're dead. Do not adopt can be appealed by the district, and then it's up to the delegation to decide whether a vote takes place to move it forward by a 2/3 affirmative. And Lynn has told us from last year, there were a couple that took a lot of conversation. So we can talk about, the appeal process is still open. If you'd like to appeal that, then that would be available, and we have another week and a day, I think, or maybe a week to appeal that, but we have to do that as a district.
I would like to appeal it. I do think, we were talking earlier before the meeting, just having a conversation about the fact that it was, it is a do not adopt. And, you know, what we are seeing and what Lynn and I saw the last time we went to the Southwestern Division meeting for the IASB is the IASB is a, and they're the legislative body that we met with, the members of the legislative body that we met with, are very big on local control. But they're not necessarily honed in on student health or student well-being. It became really an issue of, is this about local control or isn't it? And to me, I want to go back and say, no, this isn't, this is about student well-being. This isn't really about local control. And that's why I'd like to reintroduce it or appeal it.
One of the things when Terry presented this to the committee, one of the things we talked about was the shared responsibility of school districts to educate kids in the state of Illinois and the impact on mental health of cell phone usage, and how, for lack of a better word, you know, if we allow cell phones and other districts don't, they're going to have to pick up the pieces of what we have in place in policy, and vice versa. And so, you know, part of our job as educators is to advocate for all kids, not just all kids in District 7, but all kids statewide, where we have our locus of control. And I will say, great time to insert, I've heard nothing but positive things from students, from teachers, from parents about how we've implemented this policy. You all said more conversations are taking place in classrooms and even in hallways?
Yeah, I think that, like, I get a lot more homework done now, and we're not on our phones really at all. I mean, we talk to our friends a lot more now, so, like, the next thing we could implement is, like, tape, but, like, other than that, it's really good.
That's kind of dicey.
I also think teachers have been doing a really good job, like, sticking to it, because, like, I haven't really been in a classroom where I've been able to take my phone out all year, and usually that doesn't happen.
Do you think other kids are noticing the difference too?
Yeah, and I think that even grades are better now because you can't be on your phone when the teacher's lecturing. Like, some teachers are like, okay, it's up to you if you want to listen to me and get a good grade or not, but everybody has to listen now, and I think that people are, like, I know some of my friends that were, like, getting B's are now getting A's, so I think it's helping. Yeah.
That would be really nice if we could gather that data in some way.
I think
Because if this isn't brought forward, but certainly next year, to have supporting evidence, ooh.
But if that's powerful. To the matter at hand, if that's the case, you're going to have to go and do the votes. Are you going?
I am going. I've signed up.
Well, it sounds like you might have, you may be the, sorry.
So I think the
I'm
question
strong.
from the board first is, do you want to appeal that decision and try to get it presented?
So the one thing I don't know, and I wish I would have looked it up, do we need to present additional information to appeal it? Or can we just appeal it with the same information we have?
I don't know, because I've not been through that appeal process.
Yeah, I don't know, so I'm curious about that.
I mean, we could certainly try to expand that statement of resolution. I don't think that's, but I don't know that we can change any of it.
No, I
But
don't
we
think
can
we can change it.
maybe add to it if
I
that's
think we
at
have
all.
to ask that question to find out.
So there's a formal process to do that, or is it just when it comes up, you just stand up and you discuss it?
There's a formal process on the backside for the
Okay.
district
Yes.
to appeal to the resolutions committee, and then they would present it for a vote to move it forward or not.
Yeah.
So in other words, they said, we don't think it should be a thing, but we're willing to let everybody else have a say if you all ask us to.
Yeah.
The question is, what information do we have to provide? I don't know the answer to that.
So isn't it also, and if, again, I was there 3 years ago or whatever, and if you guys, if Jennifer has been here more often or Lynn, isn't it, I'll say, strategic to have other districts get on, help you promote this amongst all the delegates, that it's not just Edwardsville against no one, it's Edwardsville and, oh, well, someone from Collinsville, oh, well, someone from Chatham or wherever across the state, to get them to help promote this and
So we need to canvass the vote.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and there are districts out there right now that are implementing yonder pouches and, you know, so knowing who those districts are, they could also lend to data that you could use as part of the appeal.
Yeah, we want more people to come up and speak for it, because
Right.
there will be people that come and speak against it. We know that.
and, you know, that's where we as a K-12 district compared to if you're at districts where you have feeder schools into the high school, that they have a lot more communication and support something like this. I could see that they could have some advantage on whatever resolution they would have versus what we're trying to do, so.
Great talking point. Jennifer, Bob?
I guess from my perspective, I keyed on the comment was made about the legislative event that y'all went to about control in the district. I don't know. In some ways, I feel like I don't really have a dog in this particular fight, just because I feel like that if we are going to go through the effort of trying to rally the IASB and the state towards a common goal, it needs to be stuff that we ourselves can't control. Cell phones are within our control. We can do that. Changing school start time, that's within our control. We can do that. What we can't do is we can't affect the retirement plan for teachers. What we can't do is address some of the bigger issues that are drawing cards to bring teachers into the state, like some kind of troops to teachers program or something of that nature that requires a statewide type of effort to create those certifications and those allowances for certifications to allow teachers to come in and do those things. So from my perspective, I feel like working on issues that are not necessarily, you know, some districts not going to want us telling them how to handle their district if it's within their control now and they're choosing not to. Just like we don't want other districts coming in and telling us what we should be doing when it's clearly within our purview to be able to handle that. So I kind of feel like this particular type of resolution process really needs to be focused more on things that help the state as a whole with regard to help making us more competitive to bring teachers in or to help with those types of certification. And I'm just using that as an example, but I mean, from the standpoint of what we need to be focusing our time on is what, you know, is a statewide issue that is outside of our control. Just my opinion.
One thing that, just listening to what you're talking about, statewide issue, mobility rates are super high. We get students that move from district to district. And while, yes, we can dictate what happens within our district, you know, one of the things that we just heard is that, you know, students are talking to each other, the culture's changing, the focus is changing. And so students that come into the district that come from a different culture, you know, where cell phone usage is okay, they may not easily assimilate into the Edwardsville's way of doing things. So I can see how going statewide with an issue, especially because this deals with mental health, is more than just our district. I think an argument can be made that this does impact the whole state.
I think it's ultimately, I mean, we talk about mental health and how it's impacting mental health, but I think it's ultimately going to impact academic outcomes. And what we're seeing right now, The Atlantic just ran a report on this, is that students are having a harder time assimilating longer pieces of reading material. And they're going to college and they can't really read and understand in-depth text. And part of it, I think, is it attributed to the fact that they are not reading And what else are they doing with their time when they're not reading? So, I look at,
They're reading this.
they're
Or
on
watching
they're
videos.
watching
Yeah.
short video.
Yes.
And to me, the human brain needs to be able to dive deep into serious literature, because that's how you grow and you develop and you remember, and you take that ability and you turn that into a job skill eventually. It's something that's going to help you work as an adult. So, well, that was a really long explanation for something that I feel very strongly about, but I think ultimately, we're talking about mental health of students, but across the country, we're also talking about academic outcomes and academic performance over a long term. And that sometimes really frightens me because, when I was a kid, well, I'll give you an example. We lived in Okinawa for 3 years. We weren't watching TV. We were either playing outside or reading books or something, getting into trouble, things like that. But we weren't watching, TV, and we didn't have cell phones, and so we see that world has changed over time, and we know that, our kids have full access to a lot of things that aren't good for them. And, like Amoya and Josie said, limited cell phone use changes their daily habits. So that's why I think it's very important that we see the IASB act on it.
I also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I also think with like videos and like YouTube shorts or like reels and stuff, it trains your brain to like, you watch 5 seconds, you don't like it, you just go to the next one. And it trains you to have like a short attention span. So when you're reading like works of literature, even if you don't like it, you have to continue to read it. And it's a problem because you're not used to that.
And the longer-term outcome is everybody in the state indirectly, once they are in the work field, impact all of us and across the country. And so, I'm from public health, and it's always been our responsibility to be a leader and to do those things to help shape communities. And our community is bigger than just our school district, in my opinion.
And I think it's, if the IASB is very linear in their behavior, if they're always saying, well, we're only going to lobby the General Assembly for a certain type of thing, then it limits them. It limits the strength of their ability to really aid education, help our students.
So essentially, if you appeal this, you're going to know by when? Before the so you'll know going into it whether.
If one appeals it, do you automatically know you're going to have a voice in Chicago? Or does it still go through another process that they might say, we hear you, we understand you, but we still don't think it's going to come to the full delegate?
So the email we received says the district may appeal this decision, which must be submitted in writing to the resolutions committee via the IASB governmental relations team by October 23rd. If appealed, a 2/3 affirmative vote of the delegates present and voting at the annual meeting of the delegate assembly on November 23rd is required for the appeal to be considered and voted upon. So it sounds like if you appeal it, it at least gets presented to say, do you all want to consider this? And then it's a up or down, and then you move forward on presenting your case.
I do remember when I did the delegate assembly online, the year of COVID, that there was an appeal, and they went through the process of not rereading everything that was there. I mean, it was part of it, but there was additional information that was probably part of their appeal that was added to it. And like you said, if you go through that process and they decide to go ahead and let it go to the delegate assembly, then you do want to go out and canvass, other districts and talk to them and find out where they lie on it. And
Okay.
and that would be my 2 cents. But you've got to keep in mind that every district can send a delegate, and so if you've got 10 people there that are in support of your issue, that's 10 out of
894.
How many?
894.
Yeah,
It's not just
894.
people in support of it, it's people that are willing to speak on it also.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need to, their voices need to be heard, because if they're sitting at a table and they're in support of it, that doesn't help when you need 2/3 of the vote.
Yeah.
And,
But the more data you can put in front of them,
Yeah.
the more convincing it'll be.
and what I heard you say, you had talked to someone from a different district when you were going through the process up at in front of the committee, or preparing for that. And they've been there, had been there multiple years, times presenting it and things like that. So I guess the question is, do you want to appeal it now? Or do we want to do more homework and then present it again next year when we as a board feel like, it might get more traction rather than to bring it up? Or do you do it now and get people's attention and know that it's a topic that's up there?
So I don't think that it would hurt us to appeal it if we are denied.
And just reissue next
Yeah.
year.
But you also have a chance to talk or present to everybody that's there. And you also you'll hear the reasons they don't want it. So that
Right.
gives you a lot of good information, so.
Well, and as we learned from the school board member that was in front of us, is that he received a lot of feedback as to what board members were looking for, and then he made those changes based upon the feedback.
Yeah.
And it's not it's not like this warm fuzzy room that you're speaking to when you go in.
Not at all.
It is
Really
really
not.
not. It's there down to business. You got
Yes,
this
it's a
amount of
business
time to
situation,
get.
yes.
And I thought we were going to sit and listen to everyone, and it's not at all.
Next.
Yes, exactly. It's
Okay.
very
Very
ordered,
legislative.
very methodical,
And then if the vote is off, oh, yeah.
right?
You want to talk?
So in some respects, I think, I really believe in this. I would like to see it, I would like to appeal it. But if that doesn't work, I'm not hung up on it either.
It's always good to go through the process and
Yeah.
see how things can be tweaked for the following year. Whether it's that resolution or a different resolution that gets brought before the group.
It's actually kind of fair to say that there really wasn't a lot on here.
No, and
I
the
mean-
numbers of people, boards bringing resolutions, I think, has dropped over time.
And
I
one of
will
them-
say the resolutions that they did issue a do adopt on, I thought they were very thoughtful, careful resolutions. I really liked the language of them. Very supportive of the ones
The
that
dual
they
language
did.
one? Or you're talking
Yes.
about the language, yeah.
Yes, I mean-
I agree.
And I'm also glad to see something related to faith's law and some support with that.
Right, and you, I think there were 2 or 3.
Oh, there's 3, one on each.
Three,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I thought that was very, I think that's something that actually Dr. Shelton talked about was problematic, was the implementation of faith's law. You talked about that, I think, this summer.
Yeah. And the one that was recommended is to do a centralized agency. So just for anybody listening, one of the recommendations from the resolutions committee was to create a central database, because we currently have to do employment history reviews on every single new employee that include whether they have been the subject of a sexual misconduct investigation, which is obviously really good practice, right? But it also is a huge time taker, especially if you have people that are moving districts continuously, because you have to send it out to all previous employers. And the guidance we've received is all previous employers, not just the ones they list. And so the centralized database would allow a better way to collect that information. So that was the one they recommended moving forward. There was also one they recommended not to move forward, that essentially wanted to expand this employment history review to all current employees as well. which I can imagine, we do 50 to 100 new employees a year. I can't imagine doing it for 1,000 employees every single year. So they
Tremendous burden.
recommended that not be adopted.
And when you say employees, is that just teachers or is that any staff member?
Any staff member.
Okay. So if you've got your paper there, how
I do.
many were like our resolution that could be appealed and brought forward compared to the 6?
Only
4.
There were 4?
Mhm.
Okay.
4. There was ours. There was the one on the FACE law. There was one on criminal background checks.
Was that for school board members?
Yes, for school board members. And then there was one on the Office of the Inspector General, and that we would encourage legislation that would develop a state-funded Office of Inspector General or expand state or county office jurisdiction to investigate allegations of waste, fraud, financial mismanagement, dereliction of duty, and employee misconduct in local public schools for all employees up to and including the school superintendent and school board members. So, and there was a whole lot of information that they provided with that.
Yeah, they did, and that seemed like just a huge undertaking.
Yeah. Bob, to your point, there was nothing about troops for teachers or tier 2, both are which I think things worth exploring.
So interestingly, when we went to the, Lynn, help me out here, when we went to the
legislative event?
The legislative event.
The division.
That subject, tier 2, came up.
Good.
And all 3 legislators recognized that there was a need for change for tier 2 retirement system. It was I thought, a very interesting discussion, and they were both, I think all 3 of them expressed some concern that the retirement age is 67, and it's an unnecessary burden upon our teachers, and how do we solve this problem? And so when people are like, well, I don't understand why we want to get involved in the IASB, it's because when they tackle such big issues like this, we can lend our voice to it. We can be a part of it. But yeah, that came up. That came up when we were at the legislative event.
So in terms of process, one of the things in this year's packet, and I don't know if it's been there previously and we just not looked at it, but there are recommended motions to direct the delegate vote and to appoint the delegate from the district. And so if the board would like, we could include that as an action item on October 28th so that there can be a vote on how we respond. Unfortunately, for the appeal process, we need a decision on that tonight, and we need to reach consensus. But on the other ones, the other 6, we can take care of that in business. Action item was on October 28th.
Okay, that sounds good.
I say go for it, put Terry on it, let her present it.
I agree.
Let's do it.
We don't have to decide who's going to be the delegate tonight.
Just the appeal process.
Yeah, just, it's
Yep.
a thought, yeah. We can talk.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay. And then if you can take a look at the 6 and let me know if you have any questions, and if I need to do any research for you, they're pretty clear cut on how they impact schools, and they're all pretty broad. So.
Yeah, Terry, I bet you're glad to see the TIF stuff.
I was actually, because I do think that transparency is very, very key when you're talking about things. And like I said, I'm not against TIFs, but the transparency is, for the taxpayer, I think it becomes very important.
Good discussion. And at this time, that was our final discussion item. We will move on to our action considerations. First of which is approval of action item 3.2. Dr. Shelton.
Thank you. To recommend that the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the resignations and retirements of employees as presented earlier.
Move to approve.
Second.
And any discussion? Please call the roll.
Patey?
Yes.
Fund?
Yes.
Delariva?
Yes.
Brumback?
Yes.
Sanderson?
Yes.
Bertles?
Yes. And the board will, approval of action item 3. Okay,
2.
I'm sorry. The first one was 3.1,
Yep.
now it's 3.2. Okay, I'm sorry. Dr. Shelton.
It's recommended the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the appointment, employment, compensation, or transfer of employees, pending required certifications and professional educator license, completion of paperwork, and all background fingerprint checks completed as cleared, as discussed earlier.
Move for approval.
Second.
And questions? Please call the roll.
Rumback,
Yes.
Haiti,
Yes.
Delariva,
Yes.
Fund,
Yes.
Sanderson,
Yes.
Bertles.
Yes. Seeing no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And all